I'd like to start the meeting and welcome to today's Scottish Police Authority meeting being held in Merchants House in Glasgow. I have apologies from 3 board members, Tom Halpin, Michelle Miller and Jane Ryder. As you know, it's a requirement of the Code of Conduct that you as members declare any financial or other interests and connections in relation to today's business. Can I ask if there are any connections or declarations of interest? Thank you very much. Can I confirm that there are no other matters of business apart from those on the agenda? Thank you very much. And coming on to taking business in private, and this is in accordance with section 20 of our standing orders. Can I ask members to confirm their content to take the following items in private today? Item 11, which is to approve minutes of a meeting taken in private at the board held on the 30th of November, where we discussed voluntary retirement policy and voluntary early retirement policy and workforce scenario planning. And the meeting held on the 29th of January to approve the recommendation for the appointment of a Deputy Chief Constable Designate, Jane Connors. So those were the meetings. And item 12 is a substantial item. We're going to discuss and approve the SBA Strategic Risk Register. Are members content to take those items in private? Thank you very much. Come to the meeting, the minutes of our meeting held on the 30th of November, our public meetings. Are there any alterations to make to those minutes? Can I ask you to approve the draft minute? Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to the action log, and there are 5 actions proposed for closure. Can I ask for any comments? And then I'm going to ask for approval to approve the action log. No comments? Action log approved. Thank you very much. Item 2.2, decisions since the last full authority meeting on the 30th of November. There have been no decisions taken via correspondence since that last meeting. So I'm now going to come to my own report. Sorry, I'll get my paper. Thank you very much. I'll take my report as read. I mentioned the approval of the appointment of DCC Jane Connors to be the DCC designate, and congratulations to Jane Connors on that appointment. It's a critical appointment and made on the recommendation of the Chief Constable. I don't know if you want to add anything to that comment, Chief Constable.
Just to support your comments, Chair, and I'm grateful to DCC Connors in stepping into the role as the designate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to draw your attention to the fact that I'm now, it's not me, it's the public appointments section, undertaking recruitment of 4 additional board members, and I mentioned the 2 board members who are stepping down next month and in May, and I'll say more about that. And it's also to recognise that Deputy Chief Constable Malcolm Graham has decided to retire, and this won't be his last board meeting, and I'll say more, but I have written privately to Malcolm to thank him for his outstanding service in policing. I really have enjoyed working with Malcolm over the last 3 years as chair. I'm going to come on to some changes, temporary changes to our committee structure, and that is because 2 members are leaving, and in advance of 4 members joining temporarily, I'm going to ask for your approval at the end of this item for some changes which I've discussed with you all. And because Jane Ryder is stepping down as Vice Chair, I'm going to ask you to approve a new Vice Chair, which I'll recommend to you. In my report at the end, I have given the revised model of policing oversight group. This is a new group. It will be chaired by myself, and I'll come to that point, who else I'm going to ask your approval to be on that group. This is going to be a critical short-term group overseeing this revised model of policing. I'm going to be asking you to approve that terms of reference. But what I would like to do, because I know that the Chief Constable has taken special interest in this area, of course she has, and that we've discussed at length the additional oversight, temporal that's required. If you, Chief Constable, have anything that you'd like to comment on those terms of reference, or where broadly you think the additional oversight would add value.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful for the rate at which we've agreed what the oversight should be in relation to the new operating model, and very pleased that you're able to provide both the scrutiny and support and critical friend role for us as we move through this really important piece of work and get to a point where we're satisfied that the new policing model both meets the needs of communities, tackles threat, harm and risk, and at the same time we can operate within our anticipated funding envelope for the future. So agreed to the terms of reference and grateful for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Constable. Now, I'm going to come to, at the end, the decisions you're being asked to make with my report. Just one addition. I omitted to put into my report that I've also invited Mary Pitt-Casely to be a member of the group on the revised model of policing. So my apologies to Mary, but I'm going to ask you to include her in that. Are there any questions to me about my report? Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to go through the recommendations I'm making to you one by one, just to make sure that you're clear and you don't have to, you can say what you think, your view. Firstly, and I'm delighted that Fiona has agreed to do this, and I've talked to you all about this. I'd like your approval for Fiona McQueen to be the Vice Chair of the Scottish Police Authority from the 1st of April 2024. Thank you. I'd like to approve Caroline Stewart to be the Chair of the Legal Committee, and I'm very grateful for Caroline for agreeing to take that on, again from the 1st of April 2024. Great. To appoint Tom Halpin as a member of the Legal Committee, with Jane going, there's a vacancy there. Thank you very much. To appoint Katrina Stewart to the Policing Together Oversight Group from the 23rd of February 2024. So you start quite quickly. Thank you very much. I'd like you to approve my recommendation on the revised model of policing at terms of reference for the oversight group. Great. And these are the members of the oversight group which I'd like you to approve from the 23rd of February. Myself as chair, Alistair Hay, Grant McRae, Mary Pitt-Casely and Fiona McQueen. Great. I thought I'd said that. Karen's saying to me that the appointment of you, Fiona, to be the vice chair. Oh, sorry, I know what she's pointing out. We have an exceptional circumstances committee, which, as it meets very infrequently for exceptional circumstances, and the vice chair is a member of that group. So thank you. I was confused there. Can I ask your approval that Fiona McQueen, ex officio, becomes a member of the exceptional circumstances committee? Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. So with that, we come to the end of my report to you. I'm now going to come to the committee. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to, you've talked about Disability History Month in the context of your report, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the Disability and Carers Association for all their activities during Disability History Month. I was delighted to be asked by them to take part in their activities, and I want to thank them for allowing me to, as a member of the board, join them. I also want to thank all the members of Police Scotland and the Scottish Police Authority who gave up their lunch hours to attend the 2 online drop-in sessions that we ran on neurodiversity in the workplace. And I was honoured also to take part in DACA's first conference, which was held at Tully Allen, to which I spoke on the theme of leadership. So one of the reasons I wanted to speak to this was in the context of public interest. I wonder how many people realise how much activity goes on behind the doors, as it were. An example being the engagement and input by members of Scottish Police Authority as well as Police Scotland to work with Scottish Government on the drafting of new legislation, the Learning Disability, Autism and Neurodiversity Bill, and I want to thank them too. You are helping to create transformational change. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. And thank you for highlighting that, and thank you for your work with the disability groups, DACA. I don't go through my report verbally because there is quite a lot of in it. I of course expect you to all have read that, which I'm sure you will do. But I'm particularly pleased with our engagement with the trade unions and staff associations and the various groups. And we'll come back to that at some later stage when I've asked for a report internally about how effective we are supporting those groups and what the financial and other support is to the staff associations, to the special interest groups. So we'll come back to that over 2024. So thank you for that, Katrina. Now I'm going to come to the chair's reports. I always say this, these are the critical groups for the board. It provides in-depth look at issues which we couldn't possibly devote the time to. And I've asked the committees over the last 2 or 3 years to take more responsibility for reviewing, monitoring, compliance, and then making recommendations to us if required for approval, which there are 1 or 2 items later on. So I'm going to go through the committee chairs. I'm going to start with Fiona McQueen, who chairs People Committee. Fiona.
Thanks, Chair. I'll take my report as read. I think there are 2 areas I'd like to highlight to the board. First of all, we continue to look forward to receiving evidence of outcomes, evidence of impact, rather than description of activities. And I think with the people strategy and the strategic workforce plan having been approved, the team are now looking at outcome measures so that we can then have evidence of outcomes that are related to matters to the People Committee. So we look forward to seeing that continued improvement in performance. I think the other paper we're looking forward to next week, which was committed to in the People Committee, is looking at the impact of workload on individual members of staff, so that we can be confident that each member of staff is given appropriate level of workload, supervision to carry out their duty, whether it's police staff or wanted officers. So again, we were pleased to have that commitment and are looking forward to taking that forwards.
Thank you.
Yes, Tom has briefed me, and I think is keen to highlight again, we're looking forward to seeing evidence of outcomes and pace, but we had a good meeting at our last meeting with the IRG where we discussed partly how they're reporting, how they're progressing, and what improvements that either we're seeing having taken place and continue to need to take place. So one of them was, for instance, review of policies and impact assessment on that. So we're hopeful and content that the progress that we've seen will increase in pace and implementation.
Thank you very much. Any questions? The oversight of policing together, critical issue for policing. It's the vehicle by which we are addressing the discrimination within policing, and it's very important we keep a dialogue going about that, and we'll have more discussion in the March board, I think. Coming to Policing Performance Committee, Alistair Hay, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'll also take this report as read, but happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. But what I would like to draw out and highlight is that the performance reporting to this committee continues to develop, and we're really grateful to the Chief Constable for the focus that she brings to this, as well as the ongoing work and engagement we have with Tom McManus. And increasingly, what we want to do is promote public trust, confidence and understanding of the challenges facing Police Scotland and the prioritised actions being taken forward. The oversight and scrutiny of the committee will focus on challenging and supporting decisions made in respect of the coordination and prioritised allocation of resources and policing priorities in Scotland. A clearer articulation of what the organisation is seeking to achieve, how it is addressing the challenges, how the work is coordinated, what the benefit to the public has been through delivery of improvement activity, and what remains to be done, which will further enhance trust, confidence and understanding of both the public and key strategic partners. And the last thing I would just like to highlight is the support and the involvement that we have from COSLA at this meeting. We think over recent times this has really added value to us.
Thank you, Alistair. Is there any questions? So I'm going to come to Grant McRae, who chairs Resources Committee.
Thank you, Chair. And like others, I'm taking my report as read. I just want to highlight that during the December meeting, we did discuss the importance of an estates master plan, and we're looking forward to receiving that at our March meeting and developing things from there. But in addition to the report before you, we had a meeting of the Resources Committee earlier this week on the 20th of February, and I'd just like to follow up what's said in my report here by a couple of highlights from that report, because I think it brings into context the monitoring of the financial position. So following the update at the November authority meeting, of which the board was informed of a £5 million revenue overspend forecast, the committee was assured by the Q3 financial monitoring report. It provided us with evidence that the mitigations put in place to contain the overspend were having the desired impact, and confidence is high that the savings would be delivered. Members sought assurances that any impact from these mitigating factors through to next year's budget would be mitigated where possible. And it was explained that the delivery of planned savings from VR, VER releases and the additional funding there should mean a balanced budget can be set. I'd like to stress the effort made by Police Scotland and the SPA to reduce the figure from the original 18.9 million overspend projection last summer is recognised by the committee. We really value the work that's been done by different parts of Police Scotland in getting there, and we particularly welcome the benefit we're receiving at Resources Committee of having senior operational staff at DCC or ACC level to our discussions. Gives us reassurance that the operational impact of these decisions are actually bearing fruit. Clearly there were a lot of steps taken to reduce that original overspend, and we've asked that lessons learned from this process are captured and reported to a future meeting. Two other things just to mention briefly. Members considered the Q3 transformational benefits report and didn't really take much assurance from that data. Like the People Committee, the Resources Committee is very keen to move to reports which demonstrate the link between benefits delivery and the impact and delivery of operational policing across the country. It was agreed that further work will be done to provide appropriate assurances from the start of the next financial year from Q1 onwards to be sure that we've got a greater grip over this. And finally, you'll all be aware of plans to roll out body-worn video. The committee considered the full business case and the associated contract award. Members supported the full business case and contract award for onward recommendation to Scottish Government. However, we asked that a 3-year review be built into the project timeline, which will give the authority a timely opportunity to seek assurance that the project has progressed as planned. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Grant. Are there any questions to the Chair of Resources? We have item 10, where we'll go into more detail about the financial performance quarterly report. So we'll be able to talk to the SPA and Police Scotland staff teams and the Chief Constable about that then. So thank you very much. If I can come to Paul Eadie, Chair of Forensic Services Committee.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Just a couple of items I'll pick out because we also have the Director's report on the agenda today. First was the positive progress with post-mortem toxicology, which had, by the end of December, we were complying with a 35-day turnaround time, but by the time of committee, we got some real-time data on that reported to us, and we were meeting all the turnaround times that we projected, so that's a significantly improved picture there. The second issue was on drug driving, and the in-house performance has significantly improved there. However, over the December period, it was reported to us there was an issue with the external supplier or the external contractor that does our external testing for drug driving. And there'd been a slight problem with their delivery standards. Nothing that was going to threaten us in terms of meeting the deadlines for prosecutions, etc. But we did require some further assurance from the director, which we received about the improvements in, or future improvements in that. And we requested monthly updates on that going forward, fortnightly to monthly updates, in the spirit of keeping an eye on this issue, as the next committee meeting isn't going to be until May. So that's it from me.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions? Sometimes by necessity, governance oversight looks at the deficits and the failures or the challenges. Just want to thank Fiona and the team from the Forensic Service on that post-mortem toxicology picture. It was never certain. It was a big challenge. I think Operation Falcon, the movement into that, and then the delivery of technical scientific services has been excellent. So we'll come and have more chance to talk about that with the Director's report on a later item. But just to emphasise that, Paul, that was a particularly positive thing to learn. The final committee report is from Mary Piccati. Mary chairs the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee. Mary.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, the report summarises the business that was considered at the last meeting of ARAC. Highlight just a couple of things. First of all, we had a report from our internal auditors on a new process that Police Scotland has put in place to consider the impact of new legislation, looking specifically at the issue of the financial cost of new legislation, which is clearly an important matter. We welcomed the report from the internal auditors, and we asked for a further report once that system has further bedded in. So that was really helpful. We also considered the annual internal audit plan and approved that, and noted the external audit plan. And we had an update on the DESK project, which is a digital evidence sharing project, which has been piloted in Tayside area. We had a very positive evaluation of that pilot, and we were very pleased to note that the system had worked well. But there are still some compliance issues that need to be fully resolved, and those will hopefully be progressed so that we can move forward with that project fairly quickly. And finally, just to note that the committee approved and recommended to this the authority the SPA strategic risk review, and that's on the agenda later. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Mary, any questions? Okay, the risk discussions in the private session. But we'll make as much available as we can later on through our publication scheme. Any questions, Mary? No. Okay, just two things. I know you all know that, but I'll just say it again for everybody who may be watching, is that all our committees have their agendas published. They are all live streamed. You can watch them, and you can watch the archive of live stream, and all the minutes are published on our website. I believe it's the most open and transparent process of assurance and committee and governance oversight across certainly Scotland, probably the UK. Just want to emphasise it's important that that is the case, and if you'd like to know more, please just look on our website. The second thing, and this is for all committee chairs and all the board, is the NPCC published their Policing Productivity Review. a very interesting review about how to improve productivity. And it's an interesting methodology, very evidence-based. It's about the span of range of metrics in policing, about sickness levels, a whole range of stuff. I'm asking everybody on the board to actually take that into account. We don't have to follow it, and I'm asking the Chief Executive to help know how we can use that in it, because we're always interested in trying to look at, if not benchmarking, at least positioning where we are now, rather than using targets going, well, if that's the range, where would we like to be in that range? And that is often a more positive way of moving us up if we are below what we think is the reasonable range of outputs. But it also means that we can prioritize that which is sufficiently below. We might want to have a look at that. So that policing productivity report is a very interesting one. And I was speaking to somebody this week from Roisin Hughes from the NPCC about one of their recommendations about a police endowment fund, which I very much support from my background of running large endowed philanthropy organisations. So I hope we're going to move that one forward. We lack that kind of public policy space in policing, and I'd like to see that take place. So thank you for all that work from our committee chairs, really appreciate that. Now going to come on to our next item. Chief Constable, your own report. Hand over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I welcome and support your comments around the need for a revised model for policing and would add some perspective at this stage as the Chief Constable. Change can be unsettling, but we are building Police Scotland from a position of strength, and we must clearly explain the changes to the public and our officers and staff so that they are confident in their police service. We must organise policing in a way that we can live within our means, and I know we will greatly benefit from the oversight, challenge and support of the authority as we develop and embed a new model. As you know, I've asked Deputy Chief Constable Jane Connors to lead our programme of change, focused on delivering service transformation at pace, prioritising the front line, removing back office duplication, and creating capacity to deal with new and increasing threats. Some of our support areas in local policing and other functions have never been reformed. There is inefficiency, some duplication and repetition in the system that we can remove, moving to a regional or national model rather than providing these services at a divisional level. The change programme will inform how we shape, train, enable, equip and deploy our greatest asset, that is our workforce, our police officers and our staff, to meet the evolving needs and complexities of our diverse communities at best value. Our primary investment will always be in police officers. As Chief Constable, I'm entrusted with significant public funding. I have a duty to ensure I maximise the number of experienced officers available to the front line through the right investment in non-warranted support. So we will be carefully examining which role can and should be done by police staff, enabling a wider range of people to access a policing career and allowing even more of our officers to return to frontline and operational policing roles. Our greatly valued special constables and other volunteers are also an important part of that conversation. Cyber skills and resilience will be embedded into the organisation, providing the policing workforce with industry-leading training to enhance the investigation of online crime in all its forms, while complementing existing skill sets. So, as part of our change programme, I would seek the support and engagement of the authority in building a national conversation focused on how we achieve that strongest possible service for the public, rather than one that is heavily and solely based around officer numbers. I do think this is important in coming months when the delay in recruiting officers to balance this year's budget means headcount will be at its lowest level for quite some time, just before our planned intake in March. The number of officers available to Police Scotland has become a symbolic measurement Of course, officer headcount is an accessible shorthand for policing capacity. As I have said, we have more clarity on our funding allocation, and this allows us to restart officer recruitment, with 200 new officers due to begin their initial training next month, and we will be training more new recruits every month for the rest of 24-25. We are also carrying out targeted recruitment in rural areas. Although our staff recruitment pause remains in place, we are recruiting in priority areas such as our command and control room. What is equally important, though, is the number of experienced officers performing frontline operational policing for our communities, and how we give those officers the best service and support to do their jobs. Where we can release officers, whether through our own redesign or through resetting relationships, I'm committed to returning these officers to the front line and to operational policing. One example Police Scotland has raised before is that we have roughly 150 officers across the country assigned to duties at court buildings at a cost of £7 million a year. From next month, we will begin a trial in Edinburgh to release a small number of those officers back to frontline policing in the capital. Our aim is and must be to bring the front line of Scottish policing to the strongest position possible within the resources available. I think that it's my duty as the Chief Constable and with the authorities, and it's what the authority would expect and demand, providing the highest possible level of safety and security with the funding available in what the people and communities of Scotland deserve and would expect. As we move into 2024 with greater clarity about the funding available to keep people in the communities of Scotland safe, we received an overall improvement on our flat cash for 24-25, when there is significant pressure across public funding. When not all asks could be met and some budgets are being cut, it is important recognition of Police Scotland's value and the contribution made to Scotland being a safe place to live and work. It's also recognition of the significant successful reform policing has made. A revenue uplift of £74.5 million allows us to restart and maximise officer recruitment. Our allocation allows us to fund the cost of this year's agreed 7% pay award for officers and staff and make a credible pay offer for 24-25. A pension rebate in the region of £17 million next year will support us to progress a programme of voluntary retirement and voluntary redundancy. Our capital allocation was enhanced by £13 million, a welcome improvement, although our capital allocation has been a challenge over a number of years and remains very low compared to other police services in the United Kingdom. We welcome the settlement, but as we have touched upon, recognise that policing must evolve to live within projected funding and with an operating model that enables us to keep Scotland safe in the face of current and future challenges. We are already setting out some of those necessary at difficult times, changes including consulting on proposals to close 29 police buildings and programme on voluntary early retirement and voluntary redundancy. Some of our evolution will be in our structures and our working practices, but everything we do will be about prioritising the front line and tackling areas of high harm. At the same time of being clear, wider criminal justice reform must be prioritised across the system. I've been meeting with key partners, and I believe there is a shared recognition that innovation and improvement must be prioritised and accelerated to support better and quicker court outcomes for victims and to provide efficiency and value for the public. The overtime cost of officers being cited for court, with very few of them being called to give evidence, is £3 million. This is not a sustainable position financially or operationally. We must reduce cancelled rest days and leave and increase the time officers can spend in communities. The summary case management pilot, which expanded to Glasgow at the end of January, is an example where through closer collaboration and planning, we can achieve better outcomes for victims, including reducing trauma, and cut inefficiencies in the system, including unnecessary attendance at court for victims, police, and other witnesses. We continue to work through considerations across the cross-system digital evidence sharing capability, DESC, a crucial capability to share evidence captured, for example, by officers through CCTV and body-worn video, to help prosecutors and courts make quicker decisions about proceedings and secure swift resolutions and justice. One of my first commitments to my fellow officers and staff when I joined Police Scotland was that we had to push on with the rollout of body-worn video. As you know, the business case was agreed in private with the Authorities Resources Committee this week. With the authorities' support and oversight, and in discussion with Scottish Government, we are progressing this vital work, and I expect rollout of body-worn video to frontline officers and staff to begin in the late summer. Another clear challenge is that policing must set the parameters of our role in responding to people living with poor mental health. Each year, officers deploy to well over 100,000 mental health-related incidents. The equivalent work of between 500 and 600 full-time officers. And in over 87% of these incidents, no crime has taken place. First and foremost, policing has a duty to support vulnerable people, and at no point will we step back from immediate risk and harm. With key partners, including the third sector, we must find a balance around the care, support, and monitoring that officers are too often picking up. Resetting those parameters will help ensure the most appropriate help is provided and allow officers to return to preventing crime and responding to threat, harm, and risk as soon as possible after the moment of crisis has passed and public safety is assured. I need to give courage to frontline sergeants and inspectors that they are able to say to officers, we need to come away from that incident now. We've taken the individual to accident and emergency, and they are waiting to be seen or have been taken there to a healthcare professional. Of course, this needs system-wide support and understanding, collaborative policies and safeguards. We have now been progressing that conversation, and in November, DCC Graham led our contribution to a partnership workshop on redesigning services around unscheduled care, along with colleagues from Public Health Scotland, the Royal College of Psychiatrists and the NHS. I really welcome that engagement, and we seek to reset the parameters around our role. Police Scotland must focus intensely on our core duties and what matters to the people we serve. If what we do doesn't protect the vulnerable from harm, prevent crime, or support our officers and staff, we will challenge that and redirect resources to prioritise that front line. The rollout of technology will be a vital component of our change programme. In December, Police Scotland reached a significant milestone with the rollout of the new national crime system. The completion of the COS Core Operational Solutions project means officers from all over the country can, for the first time in policing in Scotland, access the same system to manage crime, to report cases to the Crown, and enhance our ability to deliver justice to victims. It represents a major step in the journey of a single national service as we continue to transform and introduce new technology designed to improve the services we provide to Scotland's communities. 5 new core policing systems, case, crime, warrants, direct measures and productions, replaced 44 separate legacy systems, streamlining processes and providing efficiencies for our officers. The new systems significantly reduce rekeying of information. It auto-populates fields and reports and saves time to improve information sharing between officers across Scotland and provides better insight into victims and perpetrators. The system is also an important foundation for applications such as DESK, and will give officers the capability to share evidence that we have captured, for example, through body-worn video, so that it helps prosecutors and courts make those quicker decisions about proceedings. We're also enhancing our approach to reporting on performance and driving a broader culture of accountability. Monitoring, maintaining and improving performance in Police Scotland will be used as a key tool for delivering outcomes, achieving value for money and increasing sustainability. Using data effectively and being clear on key performance indicators will mean that we can monitor and report on our performance in a positive way to support decision-making around where we focus our resources. It will also support robust scrutiny from national to local level. When completed, the rollout of our national crime system, with the completed rollout of our national crime system, we can now automate the production of performance dashboards, and these will be an increasing feature of our conversations both internally and with the authority and with others. I want every officer to take a close interest in how we are performing and to work together to fulfill our commitment that we will continually improve and perform at a high level. Our approach from April will be a clear step towards that. As Chief Constable, my operational focus relates to three areas, addressing threat, harm and risk, prevention, problem solving and proactivity, and third, the well-being of our officers and staff. With the authority's support and challenge, I want to shine a light on that work and whether it's investigating the most serious offences and securing important court outcomes, seizing illegal drugs, road traffic enforcement, or picking out the unsung, proactive community policing and prevention we know the public values. Since the last board meeting, important police work by officers and staff has been predominantly underlined by life sentences handed down to 3 people responsible for the murder of Caroline Glatchin in 1996, the death of Anne Cole in Rotherglen in December, and of Keith Rollinson following an assault in Elgin earlier this month, were tragic deaths. An arrest has been made in relation to both deaths, and my thoughts are with the families and the loved ones of Anne and Keith and everyone who has been affected. A professional and effective response to the most serious crimes is important to provide community assurance and public trust in policing. I'd highlight incidents since the last board meeting where teams and capabilities from right across the service work together to respond to complex challenges. In Edinburgh on New Year's Eve, 38-year-old Mark Webley lost his life and a 39-year-old was injured after a shooting in West Granton Road in Edinburgh. Detectives and local police officers undertook an extensive investigation and also carried out additional patrols in the area, and 4 people have been arrested in connection with this incident. Earlier this month, on Sunday the 11th February, officers responded to a report of a disturbance in Sandness on the mainland in Shetland, where a 24-year-old woman was pronounced dead. A 39-year-old man was quickly arrested, and by the following morning, officers from our major investigation teams were on the island working with local officers. These are incidents where the flexibility of our national resources is invaluable in supporting local policing. I know that this will have had a significant impact on the local community, but thankfully these cases are extremely rare. In each case, I thank all police officers and police staff who have contributed to the response and the communities for their support and assistance. It is also important for community insurance to share outcomes following investigations, and just this week, on Tuesday, 3 men were convicted over serious incidents across the west of Scotland, including the murder of Gary Moore in Airdrie from September 2019, and Rafa Lyko in Greenhall Park in Blantyre in February 2019. The convictions and our broader, extremely strong homicide clear-up rate clearly signal to those who bring violence and murder to communities that we are committed to bringing them to justice and are very able to do so. And I thank and pay tribute to everyone who contributed throughout those investigations. During the first weeks of 2024, in action right across Scotland, officers seized cannabis plants worth a combined total of £10 million, sending a clear message to criminals that drugs have no place in our communities. And on Wednesday, the 20th of December, a 41-year-old Benjamin Young was convicted of serious sexual offences against children in the Argyll area following an investigation by our National Child Abuse Investigation Unit. He is due to be sentenced next month. Young's horrific offending will have a lasting impact. This investigation and conviction underlines our commitment to supporting victims of sexual crime and protecting children from harm and abuse. We know our duty to give victims of abuse confidence to speak to police, knowing they will be listened to and treated with respect and fully supported. Over the festive drink and driving drug campaign which took place during the 1st of December and the beginning of January, officers responded to concerns, carried out targeted patrols and organised road checks. The number of roadside tests carried out by police officers increased by 21% compared to the previous years. There were 3,200 breath tests and 481 drug wipes at the roadside. Detected offences increased by 15% to 831. And although this festive focus shines a light on drink and drug driving, I want to underline that officers are actively patrolling our roads all year round and support a national calendar of road safety campaigns. We are part of a crucial partnership approach to road safety, and I would like to thank everyone who did the right thing by telling us about potential offenders and encourage people to keep reporting. Intelligence-led enforcement is a vital part of what we do, and it saves lives. Police Scotland is committed to supporting the Scottish Government's road safety framework to reduce road deaths and injuries, and we will continue to make sure we are doing all that we can to improve road safety. Chair, my written report outlines further important police work across our domestic abuse prevention, how we are tackling cybercrime, and examples of highly valuable day-to-day community policing that I am not able to cover in detail in this report, but I hope it provides members and the public with an insight into how Police Scotland is delivering for communities and people across Scotland. Chair, that concludes my update for this month. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Constable. The revised model of policing you outlined there is the second stage of public service reform being undertaken by Police Scotland. And I very much welcome the clarity which you have brought to this task, and the board supports greatly the idea, your proposal that DCC designate Jane Connors will lead this work. Having such a senior police officer lead this work of public service reform is critical in our view, and I know in your view. I would say that we expect this, I think, together to take 3 to 5 years to come to complete fruition. So reform is not a quick win, but I think it's fundamental to deliver your objectives, which you've set out there, and the objectives of the police authority of a police service that serves in the public interest the needs of all citizens and people living in Scotland. I've got a number of people wanting to ask you questions about your report. Before I do that, I just want to ask you a question myself. You launched a pilot called A Proportionate Response to Crime in the North East last year, I think, to test a different approach to the way that certain incidents are managed when reported. And when can you give an update and tell us when we might see an evaluation of that and what your initial thoughts may be at the moment?
Thank you, Chair. For members and broader audience, this pilot is part of our contact, engagement and resolution project, which has been to the board previously. And as you say, Chair, what this seeks to do is look at alternative approaches to the way in which we investigate and manage crime, very much with a focus in relation to the experience of the victim, a wider focus around efficiency, and also the victim experience. What it is not is a policy of non-investigation. So just want to be clear that we are committed to investigating crimes, but we want the reporting of those crimes to be easy to do and for our investigations to be proportionate and appropriate and support victims in relation to those needs. So what I'll do is I'll just ask DCC Graham to give some additional detail in relation to the evaluation of the pilot that we have run in a division up in the northeast of Scotland.
Thanks, Chief Constable, and morning, everyone. In sort of direct response to your question, the evaluation and future plans will be brought through, I would hope, an SPA committee in the near future, so that we can engage more fully than we have the opportunity to do today. And as the Chief Constable's already hinted at, that evaluation is well underway, and I'll say a little bit about what the initial findings from that are. It's not an entirely new concept. I mean, this is the type of assessment work and nuanced decision making that has been taking place, as I think members are well aware, in an individual case by case basis around about crime reports since the introduction of the contact assessment model and the use of Thrive, which is threat, risk and harm based. And whilst there have been various different ways of assessing the proportionality of what investigation goes into crime, it hasn't been nationally codified along the lines of a standard operating policy or procedure, nor data gathered in relation to what the outcomes of that are. And that's really the stage that we're moving into now across the whole of the country, hopefully, but based on what our findings from this early pilot period in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire were. The key that lies behind it is that every crime report is subject of individual assessment, and that won't change. The clue is in the title round about proportionality, which is always the case. Very clearly there are extremes in that. We would put far more resource into a murder or a rape investigation than we would put into a report of antisocial behaviour in a local community. If there are no lines of inquiry that can be pursued, then we shouldn't be in some ways setting up an expectation that there are things the police can do when we can't pursue any lines that don't exist. And in some respects, it's as simple as that. The evaluation of the process that we put in place in A Division, will result in some learning that we can bring forward to what future iterations of this looks like, which is important, not least in terms of how we explain and articulate what this means in the way that Chief Constable has just done, and what it does not mean, and how we engage widely with key stakeholders and with the public in advance of any future changes. The findings of the evaluation would suggest that less than 5% of overall reported crime would be subject of becoming directly filed as a result of an assessment that there are no reasonable or proportionate lines of inquiry to pursue. So it's a relatively small number of overall crime reports that have been assessed as fitting into that category. And the early indications to quantify the public and victim perceptions and experiences are that that's been very positive, i.e. we've been able to better manage public and victim expectations at the point of first contact and thereafter than perhaps we would be at the moment. And there's work underway to quantify the benefits in terms of capacity to free up frontline officers, where in the past they might have been allocated a series of crime reports where there was neither a proportionate or reasonable line of inquiry that could be pursued. So that evaluation will be shared with the police authority in fuller format, and I think we're under discussion at the moment what the best way of bringing it forward is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look forward to that report. I think for the board and its committees, what you went through there at the end is the critical issues for us, the data on response, those percentages, the internal assurance systems that you have, which you didn't mention. I think we need to have clarity how you double check your own decision making. Very interested to hear that public satisfaction and victim response. I think that's a key for me. That's who we serve. We want to hear what they have to say about their direct experience. And the benefits realization and the reallocation, I think we need, although it's a pilot, to know where those resource savings, if they are human resource savings, have been allocated. So I think those are the four heads we would like to see, and you mentioned three of those when we come together. It will go to committee, and then it will come to us. In the context, it's not entirely new. I did chair the CALM oversight group about proportional allocation of resources, the 2 or 3 million calls a year, and how you actually deal with those. So thank you very, very much indeed for that update. And we're going to come back to that. I think it's part of the backbone of efficient and effective policing that you were outlining, Chief Constable. Excuse me. So I'm going to come to a number of board members. I'm going to come to Mary Pitt-Casey first. Mary.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't have a question for the Chief Constable, but I wanted to make a comment about the new report, the new style of reporting. I very much welcome the fact that, taken together, your overview and the first half of your presentation today gives us the big picture, sets out the context and helps us understand the backdrop against which you and your team are policing Scotland. So I think that's very helpful. But also then you go on to tell us about operational issues and about specific cases. And that gives us that picture of the successes, the challenges, and what's on the horizon. So all of that, I think, is very important. It helps us, I think, understand the quality of policing that's available in Scotland, and really found the report very helpful. And thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mary. I've got a question now from Fiona McQueen. Fiona.
If I may, 3 brief questions, Chief. Thank you. First of all, about historic data washing, then about the VER-VR process, and then a bit about recruitment. I wonder if you could share with us your view on what level of assurance the historic data wash gave us, and also if there's any learning from that we can put in place to continue with that public protection.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Thanks for that question. So just to put a bit more description around this, because I'm not certain. UK-wide, that's the title that's been used. I'm not certain it's entirely clear what it means. So I'll add some detail. So this is an integrity screening exercise project that has been undertaken on a UK-wide basis. And the purpose being that while we know that 99.9% of the people that we employ, police officers, our staff and our volunteers, have the highest levels of integrity and professionalism, you all know of very high-profile cases across the United Kingdom where those standards have not only fallen below the levels of professionalism, but have moved into high levels or high-impact area of criminality. So this was a UK-wide exercise in ensuring that there was no information sitting on what's called the Police National Database that related to any of the people we employ, where there was offending or suspected offending that had taken part in one area of the United Kingdom, and that was unknown to the service constabulary that employed that individual. DCC Spears will give some detail in terms of the specifics in terms of Police Scotland, which were very, very favourable, but talks to moving forward, two things. We also know that some individuals, some corrupt individuals in policing move around policing in order to avoid capture and identification and capture. And in addition to that, where this will head in the future is a more continuous process of screening. So this was a sort of one-off, over 300,000 individuals, and the checks being made around what is the Police National Database, but there is a technological and continual process by which needs to be brought about so that we can be assured across the whole of policing in the UK that we have professional people who have the highest levels of integrity. DCC Spears will talk about the specifics for Police Scotland.
Thanks very much, Chief Constable. Good morning, folks. Just a couple of things. Yeah, it's an absolutely an integrity exercise that we carried out. In Scotland, we actually went a little bit further. So we have unique databases for intelligence and vulnerability. So not only did we have every employee in Police Scotland checked against the Police National Database, we did the same with the intelligence and vulnerability databases. We also went a little bit further and asked for a review of all instances where officers or staff had been involved in a domestic incident or there was a sexual complaint or matter reported to the police, and I wanted to be assured that in those instances that we had taken a proportionate, thorough and detailed approach to investigating those crimes. From that output, we identified 9 matters that required further attention, and almost all of those 9 matters related to what we would describe as notifiable associations, where a family member or a friend may have been convicted or potentially involved in crime. We have a policy in place, and it's about probably safeguarding our employees that at the earliest opportunity they should make us aware of circumstances surrounding that. So we've been able to reinforce that policy and address the matters that came from that. This actually complements the work we're doing around vetting, and you'll be aware that I've previously spoken about the enhancements that we've made to vetting. We've recently had the HMI inspection and vetting, and we're now going forward looking closely at the professional practice around the UK and how we handle vetting. And one of the key elements within that is about re-vetting. So we are working in the coming days to adopting that UK policy. We pretty much follow a UK standard, but we actually just want to adopt the professional practice from the College of Policing, because it brings together the best practices across the UK and embeds a future process around how we might re-vet staff. In conclusion, it's a really positive outcome. I would suggest for us as an organisation, for almost 24,000 checks carried out. It took us 6 months to review all of that, but for a very small number of instances that we've been able to very quickly rectify, is a really positive picture.
That's really helpful. And if I may ask about the VR process that you mentioned, Chief Constable, you're moving into having a new model of policing. We're asking for volunteers to put themselves forwards. So I'm interested in terms of how you balance these decisions about not raising people's expectations who perhaps would like to take the opportunity but absolutely cannot, and how we make sure that we're not letting people go who we might need in the future.
Thank you. So colleagues will know, and the board will know, on the 19th of December we received confirmation of the budget arrangements and the allocation for this coming financial year, and Director Miller and the team have worked really quickly in the intervening time between 19th of December and the beginning of January, the 8th of January, where we were able to open the voluntary redundancy retirement scheme. We are using this as a way of reducing our revenue, our staff bill, to the tune of just over £10 million. It does create an opportunity for colleagues, many of whom have worked for us for a number of years. But the process and the determination and the decision making and all of the other judgments around both the applications and the assessment of impact, both for individuals but also for the organisation, is a very, very detailed process that Katie Miller has been leading on my behalf. So I will pass to her now, and she'll talk you through the elements of this, which, as I say, are very, very, very detailed, comprehensive and far-reaching in terms of impact for the organisation.
Chief. So we opened the window, as Chief said, from the 8th of January and closed that on the 9th of February. During that period, we received 756 notes of interest from eligible staff. At the outset, there were a number of staff that were excluded from putting forward notes of interest, and those typically were areas where we had actually excluded teams from the recruitment pause as well. The 756 notes of interest that we've received would effectively take us to an FTE number of 5,570.8 for 24-25. So we're looking to reduce our headcount by approximately 189 to 220. That actual headcount reduction would very much depend upon the profile of staff who are released and the cost associated. We have put in place an organisational assessment. As with all of these types of exercises, there is subjectivity in terms of, you're looking into a crystal ball a little bit about some of the roles. But what we have done is that we've started with vacancies that we have as a result of the recruitment pause that have budget attached to them. So that's our starting point to see where we can remove those vacancies. The next bit then that we start to go into is very clear organisational design principles. So in the strategic workforce plan, we signed off a number of design principles. And in some ways, this brings us an opportunity as an organisation to really step into those. And if I could bring to life some examples of that, we have over 733 separate role profiles for staff. So that's almost for every 7 members of staff, there is a different role profile. So we have an opportunity here, yes, to recognise the uniqueness of roles, but also actually where we can move to something that's more generic, which actually enables flexibility within our workforce as well. As part of the organisational design principles, we've also looked at spans of control. And we know that we would like to increase spans of control at particular areas. So for example, at grade 5, we are seeing some averages that are 1 person or 2 people into 1 manager. And at grade 10s, the average span of control is 4.2. So we know there are some opportunities there to expand some of those spans of control. We also, through this exercise, are looking at what we call organisational layers. So to try and look at where we have grades into grades into grades. And actually, this isn't just about cost. This is about efficiency in the organisation. If we're looking for the ability to be able to empower people and to move and cut through perhaps some of the bureaucracy, taking out some of those layers actually increases the agility and the decision-making in our organisation. So there's an organisational assessment that all of the ACCs and directors are working through in relation to that. In addition to that, we have also done a piece of work to look at how we can reduce demand in the system so that staff that are, that remain with the organisation aren't left with additional workload. That's a really hard thing to do, but we have gone through a Moscow framework for that. And as a result of that, we've had back over 1,000 lines, which we've undertaken analysis on. Some of those things are what I would call business as usual, so we just move forward with them. We make the decision as an organisation, we've been empowered by the chief and the leadership team, we move forward and we make those changes. Other work that's come back is what I'd probably say is more strategic in the sense that perhaps it might need a policy decision. So that then starts to tie into the policing model and what that looks like. As part of the assessment, we also look at the risk impact of roles that potentially we'll be releasing. We obviously, as you would expect, have been looking at the equalities impact, and our EQHRA is an ongoing live document as we work through this. And in addition to that, we fall back on the strategic workforce plan. There are a number of commitments we made in there about downsizing, right-sizing or upsizing particular skill sets in our organisational roles. So there's a very comprehensive framework in place that we're all working through. As we only closed on the 9th of February, it took a few days for us to obviously do the analysis, but we are very well through those organisational assessments now. We then have governance in place, including a deep dive with the People Committee, as well as papers to the Resources Committee and then formally to the People Committee that will show where we're on track and the progress through this as we work through. We continue to work for a date of the 1st of April to confirm releases. Beyond that point, we obviously have contractual notice periods for individuals that we will need to take account of, but the 1st of April is the timeline that we continue to work to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I move on, just want to press a little bit more on the public assurances you're giving on workforce integrity. So far as I can see, you have a suite of issues that you have introduced or traditionally haven't, new ones, which are vetting to enter, management of those who are in the service, post-employment vetting, which I think is going to be upped, I think that I heard that, the confidential reporting process where people can report in anonymously about concerns that they may have about a colleague, and then this vetting, the integrity vetting across databases. I suppose the question to you, Chief Constable, is what assurance do you give us as a board about the integrity of your workforce, given all those systems and what DCC Spears says, 9 came through the wash of 23 or 24,000 as having cause for concern, which is an extremely low number. But what assurance do you give us generally about this? Because as we all know, one case severely undermines trust in policing.
Thank you. Absolutely, one case can undermine trust and confidence across policing. So what we've described this morning in terms of use of IT and screening, use of policy and practice in order to ensure that people maintain the higher standards of professionalism are all the organisational and leadership tools that we have to hand. But the biggest asset, resource and lever we have in this space is the self-regulation of colleagues with colleagues. So living by our standards, living by our values, promoting a culture where people can feel that they can either report to an integrity line or call out behaviour that falls below those standards. Address it, line managers, first, second line managers, those sergeants and inspectors feel confident to address issues, tackle them at the earliest opportunity so that they don't escalate, so that people feel as though they are working in an environment where there is equity, that their voices are heard and that they have a place in Police Scotland and can contribute to the greater endeavour of keeping the public safe. You asked me how do I know some of that? Some of the reporting that we are now seeing demonstrates a confidence that previously maybe wasn't always as strong as it could be. We've got ongoing support through training and development to those first and second line managers, both our police officers and our police staff, so they have the confidence and they feel empowered to both support colleagues, to tackle issues where they see them, and to be assured that we will support them in doing that, and that the organisation has a cultural norm where, like I say, people feel as though they are treated fairly and that they have a voice, and that their needs and their concerns are listened to. Can I give you absolute assurance that we haven't got an individual within our ranks who will challenge the integrity of us as a broader organisation? I can't give you that absolute assurance, but what I can say to you is that we are working strongly and with great endeavour to put in place and progress some of the excellent work that's already taken place. But this is a continual process of driving that positive culture and us being the police being self-policing. So that we can drive out behaviours, and where there is issues of misconduct and criminality, that we act against those people swiftly, appropriately within the law. But if they have no place in Police Scotland, they are exited from the organisation swiftly.
Thank you very much indeed. And a shared faith in the Policing Together programme is absolutely critical to this. All its pillars that you mentioned there and our oversight of it and your delivery of it, it will achieve the changing culture both of us are seeking to make within policing to improve capacity and capability, but that culture change is critical. I'm glad that Katrina, who's our next questioner, is going to join that oversight group, and I look forward to having some discussions at a board meeting in a reasonable future about the progress being made under Policing Together, which I know is being led by ACC Spears at the moment. So thank you very much for that, and on to you, Katrina, for your question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. You mentioned special constables, chief constable and volunteers in your report, so it's in relation to that area really, and specifically I think in terms of community engagement. So noting that there's been a dramatic decrease in the numbers of special constables, not just in Police Scotland but actually across the UK in the last 10 years. And also aware that you know, there's a Police Scotland, you know, you've reinforced your commitment to supporting the role, and specifically in terms of, so three areas were outlined in the report last year: employment support programme, officer return opportunities, and the seldom heard communities programme. So my question then is, what is your view of the role of Special Constable in the context of your revised model of policing in Scotland? And a supplementary to that would be also to note that there's been an increase in the youth volunteers, Police Scotland's youth volunteers over the last 10 years, which is very encouraging. But so how would those two things relate to each other? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. So, in response to your direct question, we are committed, as indicated in my report, to volunteers in the broader sense, whether that's youth volunteers and the huge amount of work that's been done in relation to that and the impact that those volunteers have, and our special constables, who I see as a key part of that broader policing family. You've indicated there that the numbers have reduced. Some of those people have become police constables, and often a route from a special constable role is seen as a way into and a career progression into policing, which we welcome. But I know that we have also done some work in terms of identifying the people within the special constabulary who are continually providing that commitment of time in local communities, hours spent supporting the broader policing of Scotland, and those who maybe over time, shall I say, their enthusiasm has maybe waned a bit. So we have done some work in terms of now having a special constabulary strength of 400, who are all dedicated people providing really valuable time and service to local communities. Moving forward, we have done some initial examination in terms of, you know, what's the recruitment journey and training experience if you want to join us as a special constable. There are some improvements we can make there in terms of making ourselves more accessible on a nationwide basis, and recognising that we want to encourage and be attractive to people both from urban areas and into the most rural areas. So Director Miller is doing some work with our volunteering team in order to how we make ourselves both more attractive and make the route into the special constabulary a more straightforward one. One more point before I finish is to say that we're also considering expansion into specialist areas of business. So the obvious and growing one is in the cyber arena, and being open to taking people as special constables to work in those specialist, growing and more niche areas of the business, as opposed to just attracting people into what we see as frontline or community policing roles. So I've seen that elsewhere across the United Kingdom, and I think there's an opportunity, but our recruitment then has to be tailored so that people who have those skills will be attracted to come and join us.
Yes, because that's a very interesting area, isn't it? What would entice people to come and take on a role of that kind? But the thing that comes to mind when you're speaking there is things like the apprenticeship models and bringing people into the cyber areas, for example, people that have the massive aptitude but perhaps haven't actually had the opportunities to go down those routes. I think also it feels like there's a very good opportunity there to build that relationship between the community and Police Scotland when you can engage with people at that interface. So that's really encouraging. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Caroline Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Do you want me to say a few words about the professional reference group for Policing in a Digital World now?
If you give it a context, yes, through that, and then, yes, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I'll say a few words about the group because we haven't talked about that publicly. So the Policing in a Digital World Professional Reference Group is co-chaired by DCC Connors and myself. It brings together a range of external specialist stakeholders with the key objectives being to support and challenge Police Scotland on the implementation of the cyber strategy called Policing, Keeping People Safe in the Digital World. Our joint vision is to become a centre of excellence in digital and cyber policing. The Scottish Police Authority is committed to supporting Police Scotland build public trust through open, transparent discussion to build effective preventative partnerships and secure additional investment. And your announcement about the specials is very, very welcome in this regard. The most recent meeting of the group was held on the 18th of January. A discussion focused on the growing threat to Scotland's people from cyber-enabled fraud and how Police Scotland plans to respond to this changing landscape. There was also discussion about the need for continued communication and awareness raising with the public to minimise opportunities for cyber criminals to operate. Police Scotland updated the group on the significant work that's been ongoing as part of the Policing in a Digital World programme, including the rollout of digital forensic triage vans, introduction of digi-dogs, and progress towards ISO 17025 accreditation for Police Scotland's forensic laboratories. So I just wanted to give everybody an update on the work of this group that's been going for now for over a year. And now I'll maybe go to my question. First of all is to say congratulations to Police Scotland on winning the Financial Fraud Team of the Year award. That was really excellent, so congratulations to everybody involved in that. And given that this is the fastest growing crime type, I just wondered if you'd like to comment on the sort of nature and type of offences that you're seeing in Scotland just now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I'll come to the Policing in a Digital World programme and the reference group first, if I may, and then talk a little bit about some of the offences. So the Policing in a Digital World programme has been in place now and as Caroline has said, has delivered a significant number of things. The whole point of it is to keep us focusing forwards. We know that crime keeps changing, we know that online crime is growing, we know that fraud is growing, and there is a cyber element in more and more crime. So being able to focus forward is absolutely essential. The professional reference group provides us with different independent people from Scottish universities, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the Cyber Resilience Advisory Board. So it very much fits into our human rights framework, which, as you know, underpins everything that we do in policing. So making sure that we are human rights, thinking about that throughout as we do the different things. But what it also does is it makes us think differently, get challenged, particularly some of the universities, some of the students, some of the way that they think and how that feeds into us is really important, because policing can get very tunnel vision, can be very traditional, and we need to be able to broaden out our thinking. So that's one of the key things that the professional reference group does bring to us. It also provides us opportunities. The specials is an absolutely case in point, where there will be people who want to become involved in policing, either as specials or as part of our kind of workforce. How do we bring people in with special skills who want to work with policing for a while, but actually it's not their long-term career? And that's absolutely fine, and we will benefit for that. The group can be quite challenging, being able to look at existing technologies and how that's going to change, but introduction of new technologies, it's really important that we keep the public safe, but we understand where you could infringe on somebody's private life or other areas is there as well. So making sure that that group kind of keep us as a conscience to that as well. In terms of fraud, what we're definitely seeing an increase, as people know. A lot of fraud is online. We are seeing a broad range of ages. It's not just older people who are now being subject to fraud, younger people. And also we see romance fraud and things like that coming through, which is very difficult because it's not something that people want to report. So often with fraud, people feel silly, they feel vulnerable, and they don't like to report it to us. What I would say to people is, please do report it. For us to be able to gain intelligence and understand where these criminals are coming at, we need to have that information as well. And working with the business industry is essential, because the new threats, you know, the different phishing, the malware, I sound like I know what I'm talking about in terms of all of that, but those are the types of things that actually we're seeing, where we infect people's systems, people's emails, people open an email, and actually it gives links into your system and potentially into your data. So for me, the professional reference group is really important because it keeps us grounded in the human rights and how we're doing that, but it also enables us to look forward with the work that we're doing about fraud and cyber to make sure that we are staying ahead of the criminals and keeping the public safe as well.
Thank you very much indeed. I think this is another core part of the revised model of policing, the partnership that Caroline and the DCC talked about there, leading to effective prevention, because only by working in partnership with business, the suppliers and the regulators can you actually reduce the flow of cybercrime into our businesses and into our homes. And I think this is one of the challenges of the 21st century, to actually find the proportionate response to stop that happening. And Police Scotland is not in a position to stop it, but it is in a position to be advocates, effective partnership advocates. Very much agree with that. So I think that should be, I'm sure it is baked into this future model of policing. And just thank you, Caroline, for the time to co-chair with DCC Connors. That's very important. I'm going to come on to Grant to ask about the change programme.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Chief Constable, for the comments on the changes to prioritising frontline policing in your report. As the Chair has said, we welcome the programme. We very much welcome the programme of change focused on delivering service transformation at pace. And we all, of course, recognise the importance of being able to measure the impact of this, both financially and operationally. So I wondered if you or DCC Connors would comment on how you see the impact of this being reported in public at future meetings of the board.
Thank you very much for your question. As has already been covered this morning, the Chief Constable has laid out the expectations and the context with which we're operating in. Director Miller has laid out some of the workforce complexity and again some of the context that goes with that. What we're absolutely clear is that we must reform our police service to be able to live within our budget and within our means. Policing in Scotland has already demonstrated its ability to reform, but its focus has predominantly been on the national divisions. Not so much focus has been on, for example, local policing or some of our support functions that support the kind of front line. So what this has resulted in, as the Chief Constable has already said, is inefficiencies and some duplications in our services. We have officers who are not performing frontline roles, they're actually sitting back of house, for want of a better expression. So our change programme over the next 3 to 5 years will involve a review and redesign. We'll be looking at our services in policing with a specific focus on local policing. And our core areas in local policing: response policing, where we're responding to calls for service from the public; strengthening our community policing model, which is where we'll be working with our communities and partners to do problem solving and prevention; our CID, our investigation functions; and also protecting the most vulnerable, which is our public protection departments and our core areas. But we will also have a priority focus on redesigning our enabling or our support functions, our back of house. And we will look at how we can regionalise or nationalise those rather than having everything sitting in divisions. And I've said, most importantly, we need to return our officers who are sitting in those functions back onto the front line, into operational policing, because we have too many officers sitting in that space. It's grown over time, custom and practice, and it needs to be resolved. As part of our review and redesign, we're also going to support it with our focus on creating capacity. And that is creating capacity for our officers and staff. Our well-being of our officers and staff is an absolute priority for the Chief Constable and everybody in Police Scotland. And we need to be able to do that. So our service design teams have looked at key areas where we can start to create capacity. Mental health demand, which has already been touched on today, missing people, citations, and some of the criminal justice reform work has already been touched on today. IVPD and our vulnerable persons, and how we multiple times have to enter data and how we information share with our partners, and court attendance, which again, these are all areas where we can create capacity by reducing the demand. Work with that is ongoing in all of those work streams, often with our key partners, because not all of those areas are the gift within policing to be able to do. And finally, as part of this, we'll also be looking at future capabilities. So being able to do the redesign work, the creating capacity means we can reinvest the benefits, which need to be tracked correctly, into building capabilities for the future. We've talked about cyber, we've talked about fraud, investing in online investigations so all of our officers, whether they are frontline or their specialisms, have that capacity and capability and confidence to be able to look at some of our online crimes in particular. Crime is constantly evolving and our communities are constantly changing. We have to be able to have that future look in it as well. Underpinning all of our transformation will be technology. They are absolutely opportunities for us. We have seen the benefits of the single crime system. We are seeing the benefits of the desk pilot, mobile working, body-worn video will be rolled out in the summer. There are opportunities for automisation. There are opportunities for modernising our contact with the public through our command centres, but also how do the public want to interact with the police and using technology to do that. So in summary, we're going to be tackling and reinvesting all of the benefits, prioritising and making sure that we can deliver on our promises that we are putting forwards. It will be challenging. It will be a very challenging transformation project. It needs to be done at pace, but it needs to be controlled and it needs to be effective, and the public need to be engaged with so they understand exactly what we're doing and where we're going with this. So it'll be review and redesign of our services, local policing and our support services, creating capacity, reducing demand, developing our capability forwards so that we can actually keep our communities safe. And we welcome the oversight of the SPA, particularly around that benefits tracking and management of that in this process. And I will leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And, sorry, Grant.
Thank you. I was going to say thank you very much for summarising, because a lot of the points have been raised earlier on this morning, but I think bringing it all together is so important. But I think it's also important for the public to understand the impact of all these changes as they're rolled out, so that there's a communication link coming through all that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we're running over time. I'm going to take 3 more questions. I'm going to take a break at the latest at 11:45. So I now have Alistair, and then Paul, and then lastly from Katarina. Alistair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief Constable, for your report. I want to make a comment, and then I've got a question around the resetting of the parameters in responding to people with poor mental health. I really appreciate that you've highlighted in your report and recognised in your report some of the day-to-day examples of your neighbourhood policing week. And as it says here in the report, the daily policing may not catch headlines, but it's invaluable and highly valued by the public. And amongst, you know, the complexity and the challenge that you've outlined in your report, I think that recognition is extremely important. So thank you for that. In terms of resetting the parameters, as you explained, it will require a whole system approach. HMI have highlighted that in a recent thematic, and later on in the Chief Executive's report, speaks about a mental health distress partnership delivery group. So this is a complex issue. And you're dealing with people that are extremely vulnerable. So you say in your report that you want to give frontline sergeants and inspectors the courage to say to officers, you can leave them now. They're in a, inverted commas, safe place. In a practical sense, how will you give that courage to your frontline inspectors and sergeants? And then the second question I've got is, it is, you know, a significant demand on policing, over 100,000 calls. You won't release 500 to 600 full-time officers' time. I appreciate there'll still be a big demand in there. But how will you understand how much of that demand is being, resources being freed up, and how will we be able to track how it's being fed into other areas of policing?
Thank you. And the question, grateful for the question, Alistair, because it allows us to discuss, I think, in more detail the, we use the word complexity, don't we, a lot in policing. There is a lot of complexity in relation to this. So in terms of in response to the courage question, the courage, the authority, the support to make those decisions. Police Scotland will never walk away from vulnerable people, those that are experiencing both very acute mental health episodes or where they pose risk, obviously, to themselves or the public. But as has been well documented, the amount of time we are spending supporting people and stepping into where I think as a broader society we would all want and have a realistic expectation that other services are there for people in crisis, or where that acuteness moves to something which is more of a support arrangement. So in terms of the courage, the practical things that we're involved in with partners, there are some really excellent examples of local provision for individuals who feel as though they need additional support, and we can go into a bit more detail if you'd like. We need more of those. So there is the opportunity for officers to know when they're supporting an individual, where can they get professional help and advice. But over and above that, better use around risk assessments, so that we give our officers a clear framework by which they make the assessment in relation to when's the point at which it is reasonable, when faced with all the other demands on policing, that they leave an individual and get on with their other duties. If this was easy, we'd have done it by now. There is a huge amount of legislation that sits around this. Human Rights Act, Article 2, our wellbeing duty, and in addition to that, we are subject, as you know, and Michelle McLeod's here from the PERC, a degree of scrutiny that is right and proper as a public authority, but probably is beyond anything else you'll see across the public service. So there is the broad nature of the challenge. So practically, good local provision, good risk assessment, some redefining when we scrutinise our roles and responsibilities around the legislation, and a confidence for that, we collectively need to give our frontline supervisors, then when set against the other challenges that exist in every hour of policing in any day, they can make good, solid, well-documented decisions that will stand scrutiny, and that they feel confident in doing so. I don't know whether, Malcolm, did you want to add anything more into that?
I'm happy to say a little bit more about some of the examples that are ongoing, which will give a flavour of the direction of travel, as well as things that we will learn from as we develop into the new operating model across the organisation. The Chief's already summarised it. In its essence, we've got to work in partnership with other bodies in terms of redesigning services, and we need to develop policy underpinned by risk assessment that's got a clinical basis for our officers to have confidence that they're making decisions which will withstand scrutiny, but which are proportionate to the circumstances that they're dealing with, and that they can make relative to a policing purpose, as opposed to perhaps a wider concern that perhaps isn't being picked up by another organisation at that time. And part of your question was, can we achieve that? we are moving quickly towards building momentum, which I see evidence of there being in the system across other partners. But I do think it's right to acknowledge that we can't achieve it on our own, and that the commitment that we get from partners is also going to be dependent on the demands and resource constraints that we see within the NHS and local government, and what opportunity they have to develop and commit to joint service models where at the moment it's clear that the demand is exceeding the supply of service availability. In relation to the things that are going really well in local areas, up in Aberdeenshire, we've got a crisis intervention team. It's a fantastic example of a joint service that's available to the police to refer directly into in a local area. In the Forth Valley Health Board, we've got the Strive model and a risk assessment tool which seeks to get ahead of people that are identified as being likely to come into contact with the police in crisis. In Dundee and Perthshire, we've got the Nuke and the Lighthouse, which are facilities that the police can refer to when people are in a point of crisis and act as a place of safety, and therefore they are staffed. And we've got a similar facility in U Division in Ayrshire as well. We've done all the work round about the mental health pathway, which has been reported into the Police Authority previously. That's a collaboration between the Scottish Ambulance Service, NHS 24 and C3 within Police Scotland, whereby people are diverted towards a more appropriate service at the point where a call is made for service into the police, and we continue the rollout of the distress brief interventions. We know that we need to do more with the data that we gather around this to kind of leverage out where the best outcomes can come for people. But ultimately, in summary, those different models that are emerging are to some extent an evidence of the Scottish model, that it's devolved to local health boards and local government to work in collaboration with the police. But as a national service, we're in a strong position to look at improving more consistent and similar outcomes for people where we can see some of the differences in service across the country as well. And that's what the work that's already been outlined will continue to strive to do.
The second part of my question was about, if you free up resource, how we'll be able to track how it has been deployed into other areas as you develop your new policing model.
Yeah. So the data in terms of time, hours spent currently is of good quality, and we can see that at a more local level. So in response to what would we do with that time if we freed it up? So similar to our earlier discussion around proportionate response to crime, move that into the preventative space, move it into the ability to investigate, problem solve, tackle antisocial behaviour, be able to do some of those areas of key business more quickly, and then talking to that broader wellbeing piece, Federation colleagues, directly to ourselves as an executive from frontline officers, the opportunity to have that downtime, to have that time for a proper meal break. Some of the high profile incidents that I described in my report, where lives have been lost, it really, and I know colleagues know this, and we've talked about it before, but the impact on our frontline officers when they're attending these incidents, and the ability for them to take a breath, to come back to a secure environment and take a breath and debrief, and those early initial interventions to support our colleagues who see a lot of trauma and deal with it so exceptionally well every single day. So more broadly, Alistair, the ability to push more into the problem-solving prevention space, but also an opportunity to provide extra care and time around supporting and being able to debrief and decompress, which currently on occasions we're not able to provide because there is more demand coming to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're pushing up against my second time barrier. So we've got 2 more questions. Can I ask the 2 questions to keep it very short and the answers as short as possible? So I'm going to come to Paul first.
I think I'll make my question a statement rather than a question because most of my question has been answered already, to be honest. It's about the Core Operating Solutions project, and anyone that's been involved in large-scale or even small-scale technological change would know that coming towards 5 core policing systems from 44 legacy systems, that's really quite an achievement, and it's just to congratulate you and your team for getting that over the line. It's quite something. So I was going to ask about benefits, but you've kind of expanded on that in your remarks, so that's me.
I think the board would all say that. Great. Alan.
Thanks, Chair. Just the briefest comment. I guess people will be interested in what is the benefit to an officer who's delivering a frontline service. First and foremost, the data that's now in those 5 systems is trusted data. We've moved the data across. We've been able to cleanse it, check the integrity of the data, so they can be confident when they access data it's accurate. Secondly, they have the ability through their mobile device to update a report, to create a report, and actually it prevents them required to go back to the office so they can stay on the street for longer. The other part is they can access real-time data, so it helps them in making their critical decisions. And I think finally, when we move resources across the country to police an event, they can access data locally, and it's at their fingertips because it's on their mobile devices. So we're seeing huge benefits around efficiency, timekeeping, but also accessibility to data.
Thank you very much. You should never underestimate the challenges of IT merger legacy systems, and we should celebrate it when it appears to be working well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll also try and keep it very, very brief. I mean, firstly, just a bit of a shameless plug-in for the Conduct and Complaints Committee, which will be taking place next week. We will be discussing 2 of the topics that we have already touched on during the board today, which is the historic data wash and the Police Scotland Professionalism and Prevention Programme. So do tune in. It will be broadcast, as the Chair has indicated. And secondly, I would also like to very much echo the comments that Mary made earlier at the start. I do appreciate the new format of the report. And I think what comes through very, very clearly is that there is a real focus on reprioritizing the activity towards the core tasks of policing, i.e. really focusing on the things that only Police Scotland can do in the wider environment, which I think from a strategic perspective absolutely makes sense. And again, we've explored what it will look like in practice and how that refocus really links into the new model of policing. And again, just kind of trying to make it more of a statement than a question. You know, we obviously a lot of the efficiencies will be made through back office redesign, but also we did talk, and Chief Constable, you did talk about changes to the service that we provide as well. And again, you know, being very cognizant of the fact that we don't operate in a vacuum and that there are other agencies on which our decisions or Police Scotland decisions will very much impact. I was just wondering, what is the buy-in of our partners in the broader, in the broader justice system, but also amongst the other blue light services, for example? So, do you feel that we have sufficient buy-in for the things that we need to achieve throughout this, which will inevitably have an impact on other organisations and the services that they provide in their capacity as well?
Thank you. I'll give you a brief answer. That's the indication from the chair. So, in relation to all of the programmes, elements of change, and proportionate response to crime is a good example. Extensive consultation going on across all of the key stakeholders in relation to that. It has an obvious impact on some and a less obvious impact on others, but using the networks that we have, whether they're through local scrutiny groups, whether they're the connections at an executive level with key stakeholders. But I suppose I come from a position where you can't consult enough. Nobody will ever say you did too much of it. They'll always possibly indicate where you could have done it better. But definitely a key theme of the change moving forward, to ensure that we're clear with the messaging, people understand what impact it has, both in relation to service, but also impact on us addressing the issues of trust and confidence and legitimacy, so that we take people with us, but recognising that there will be some challenging conversations that take place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your report, Chief Constable, and for all the answers you and your team provided in a very clear and transparent way. There's lots on the agenda, as you quite clearly indicate there, and we'll be picking up many of those themes for the next year, 2 years, and 3 years. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask for a short break now. I'm going to ask you all to be back at 12:05. Thank you very much. start again? Right, welcome back to the second part of today's morning session. I'm going to move straight on to item number 6, which is the SPA Chief Executive's report. Lynn Brown, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. My report covers a range of issues, and I would like to highlight the following areas. The first is in relation to the police appeals tribunals. These tribunals hear appeals from police officers against decisions to dismiss or demote in rank because of misconduct proceedings brought against them. Tribunals are administered by the authority and comprise 3 independent lawyers from a pool appointed by the Lord President of the Court of Session. The tribunals have always been held in public, but the authority, in its commitment to continued improvement in transparency and governance, wishes to promote this fact that these are held in public. A protocol has been agreed with the relevant stakeholders to allow proceedings to be delivered in an appropriate manner and is attached in my report. The new procedure will apply from cases that have been raised from the 1st of January 2024. Chair, the Chief Constable spoke in her report of the challenge to policing arising from mental distress in the community, and Mr. Hay also raised it as one of his questions. A mental health distress partnership delivery group has been established comprising representatives from the Scottish Government, Police Scotland and the authority. One of the areas being progressed is a series of local area partnerships workshops in the spring to look at best practice and will involve NHS practitioners, social care and police representatives. Workshops are jointly facilitated by the authority and the Scottish Government. Chair, over the last 2 months, the authority has hosted delegations from the West Midlands Police Crime and Commissioner's Office and the Police Authority of the Republic of Ireland. Details of the areas explored are set out in my report, but these were particularly focused on how we, as an oversight body, assess and promote public confidence in policing. And on this theme of public confidence in policing, I'd like to draw your attention to the online public seminar planned on the Police Scotland use of recorded police warnings, which will be on the 8th of April. Finally, the note of the most recent Scottish Railways Policing Committee is appended to my report. The authority was represented by board members Tom Halpin and Mary Pitt-Keithley. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. I've got a question to start from Mary Casey. Mary.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for your report, Chief Executive. I wonder if we go for a minute to the police appeal tribunals that you mentioned. Just to give us some context, could you give us an idea of how many of these there are normally?
Thank you. Since 2013, there have only been 14 of these police appeals tribunals, of which 7 upheld the appeal and 7 did not uphold the appeal. So they're not significant in number. What was important for us was that they are held in public and the public are aware of this.
Absolutely. It's the visibility that we would
Yes,
welcome.
visibility.
So thank you very much for that, just to give us context.
Thank you very much. Any other follow-up? I should have reminded us all, actually, at the start of the session, some of us are finding it difficult to hear, so the acoustics aren't great. So if you could not only just speak into the microphone, speak up and out into the room, that would be great. Thank you very much indeed. So if there are no other questions to the Chief Executive, can I move on to item 7, which is a Forensic Services Director's Report, and over to Fiona Douglas, our Director. Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take my report as read and just highlight a number of areas within it. So Forensic Services continues to deliver a programme of transformational change across the organisation through the implementation of our new operating model. As you would expect, delivering change alongside maintaining uninterrupted service delivery brings challenges. However, Forensic Services continues to deliver an overall strong performance with challenge in some discrete areas. And it was these areas that were discussed in detail at the last meeting of the Forensic Services Committee earlier this month, alongside how Forensic Services is managing risk in this area. We continue to forecast 0.5 million underspend for this financial year. This underspend reflects the challenges in the pace of recruitment into posts in this new operating model, and also some of the impact of creating consequential vacancies. Alongside this, we have reported efficiency savings of 270,000 year to date. This focus on efficiency across the organisation will allow Forensic Services to finalise the first phase of implementation of our new operating model. At the Forensic Services Committee earlier this month, I presented the benefits management framework and plan for our programme of strategic change and how the status of realisation of these benefits is progressing. Cashable benefits are being reinvested to progress the implementation of the model. So it is both these benefits and the efficiencies which we are delivering that are allowing us to transform the organisation through a self-investment approach. An area of particular scrutiny for both the Forensic Services Committee and from members of the board has been around our performance in post-mortem toxicology service provision. This is the service that transferred to Forensic Services from Glasgow University in December of 2022. I'm pleased to report that the service is now well embedded and performance has stabilised, with both priority and non-priority cases being completed within required timeframes. This is a significant achievement and has been achieved through the hard work of a team of expert scientists and with partnership and support across Police Scotland support services and also with support from the Crown Office Procurator Fiscal Service. With regards to other toxicology analysis within the service, good progress has been made internally in relation to in-house drug driving toxicology analysis, with several months now of consistent delivery of key performance indicators in this area. This has included supporting the festive drug drive, drink drive campaign, and the Operation Hitch Toxicology Improvement Group received an excellent presentation from Transport Scotland around the effectiveness of this campaign in our last meeting. There have been challenges experienced by our outsourcing partner in relation to drug driving toxicology analysis over the past 3 months, which has had an impact on the speed of delivery of toxicology analysis results. We have continued to work very closely with our outsourcing partner to manage the contract that we have with them, and performance has improved and will continue to improve significantly, with an expected to return to contractual and compliant delivery in April of this year. This short-term impact on service provision has required increased focus and scrutiny of cases through the system by Forensic Services, Police Scotland and the Crown Office. But we have established mechanisms in place that mean the risk of any increase in the very low risk of cases being unable to proceed to prosecution as a result of lab delays has remained very low throughout this period. Forensic Services continues to work with the Leverhulme Research Centre at the University of Dundee in progressing the work on understanding the value and contribution of forensic science. A researcher has now been identified to take on this vital project and is anticipated to start in May or June of this year. I want to offer my thanks to Jane Ryder, the Vice Chair of the Authority, for all her work in supporting this group. It's an important piece of work and it's anticipated to take around about 18 months to complete. And the Leverhulme Research Centre have been absolutely vital in agreeing to fund this important and vital research. Finally, in January, we received confirmation from the Biometrics Commissioner for Scotland that SPA Forensic Services was using biometric data and technologies in a lawful, effective and ethical manner, and we are compliant with the Scottish Biometrics Commissioner's Codes of Practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for the report. I have a couple of board members who'd like to open the questioning. Paul Eadie first.
Yes, thank you very much. And thanks very much, Fiona, for an excellent report, which is highlighting a lot of the really positive things that you and your team are doing. One of the things I wanted to ask first was about the long-term sustainable model, which is salted in there quite nicely. And your report talks about some of the benefits of that. But this is a public board meeting and general public are tuning into this. I think it might be an opportune moment for you maybe to explain a little bit more about what actually the long-term sustainable model involves. How does it change things?
Thank you, Paul. It's probably worth putting a wee bit of context in place before I answer your question, in that we have now a stable provision of a mix of in-sourced and outsourced drug driving toxicology analysis capability that is minimising the risks that we had seen previously and the risk of not being able to proceed cases over the short-term period where demand is as we currently expect it to be. We are in a strong position. However, in the long term, we know that the ambition of Police Scotland is to roll out the roadside drug driving testing further, and we're very supportive of the need to do that and the need to keep the roads safe across the country. In order to manage the increasing demand that would bring, we need a long-term sustainable model for toxicology analysis provision that will meet those ambitions of Police Scotland. And allow us to better understand the actual size and scale of the issue of drug driving on the roads of the country. So the long-term sustainable model really allows us to grow our capacity to be able to deal with that increased demand of the future. So a lot of work has been done on developing options around what a long-term sustainable model could look like. However, there are other pieces of work which are currently ongoing, which are really very relevant pieces to look at understanding the demand further, taking into account recommendations made by HMICS in their recent review of drug driving to maximise internal capacity through technology change, as well as looking at our internal toxicology strategy to make sure that we are maximising the internal in-house capacity that we have. So we need to develop those options for the long-term sustainable model further, and that is what we intend to do over the coming months.
Thanks very much. And I'm really sorry, but I misspoke. It was the new operating model I was meaning to ask about. Could you expand on what the new operating model involves?
The new operating model for forensic services transforms the way that the service will deliver forensic science of the future across every aspect of the work that we do. So instead of the organisation being structured around scientific disciplines, which has been an important structure to drive consistency across the country, following that move from regional laboratories to national service. So we've gone through that process. The technology platforms and processes are consistent. However, what we need to do now is to maximise the responsiveness and flexibility of the organisation, making sure that we have multi-skilling across roles, that there aren't any structural barriers to having flexibility across the different aspects of the service. So rather than looking at scientific specialisms, we're looking at the areas of forensic science that are absolutely specialist, but also the vast array of areas of forensic science that can be more general activities, and then maximising our ability to be responsive in delivering those.
Great, thanks for that. So a more efficient service, for want of a better description, that's much more in keeping with the needs of this decade.
Absolutely, efficiency is a key part of it. The other key area of delivery of the new operating model is to speed up the delivery, particularly in response to local policing demands, making sure that we're providing faster intelligence to Police Scotland to enable them to act on the results of forensic science more quickly.
Great. And the last question I've got is about the references to biometrics, and I'm really pleased to see that we're complying with the Biometrics Commissioner. And I wondered if you'd care to expand on that, the compliance with the Code of Practice.
Forensic Services welcomes the Code of Practice from the Biometrics Commissioner. I think it's a really positive step forward in scrutiny and governance in and around this area. There has been an awful lot of work done across Police Scotland and Forensic Services in how we use and manage our biometric data. and we have a very collegiate approach with the Scottish Biometrics Commissioner. So having the confidence of the Commissioner in our compliance to his code of practice, I think is a really positive step forward, and is the result of a lot of work that has gone on across both organisations to make sure that we are compliant with that code. So there's been a lot of work that has gone on to that in terms of proceduralising certain aspects. The key next step is for us to look at the development of a shared joint strategy around how we use biometrics across Scotland.
Thank you very much, Paul. Just before Katarina comes in, the question about how you improve the service response to Police Scotland, in a range of areas, and you mentioned the critical role of technology, which I would have thought would be a key driver for improving the capacity that you have. Can you just tell us about your judgment about your capital programme and about the availability over the medium term? Again, we're talking 3 to 5 years of technology which might transform the human side or engagement or investment in forensic science and put it into AI or other forms of technological, let's call it a black box. So what do you foresee your capital resource to be to meet what you can see, and how optimistic are you that technology will make a significant difference in the service you're providing to Police Scotland and the Crown, of course?
Thank you, Chair. There's an important piece of work that we are starting within Forensic Services to develop technology roadmaps across each of the scientific disciplines which we have in the service. And I think that's really important, to take a 5 to 10 year view of how technology is being enhanced across a range of different areas which could have an absolutely strong and vital application to policing and to the delivery of justice. Artificial intelligence is clearly one of those. I think it's fair to say that there's a level of nervousness in and around the use of AI, particularly in a field of forensic science that's heavily regulated and accredited. The need to have strong validation, repeatability of results, all of these things pose some significant challenges, but absolutely there is an application of artificial intelligence into forensic science, where we could look at how we can automate elements of pattern recognition, for example, within the services that we do. Broadly, technology is moving at pace. DNA technology has moved at pace for the last 20 years, and you can see the huge transformation in what we were able to do 20 years ago in comparison with the contribution that DNA analysis and results make, not only in prosecutions, but also in exoneration of innocent people and eliminating people from police inquiry. So the field of DNA will continue to accelerate. Some of the other forensic disciplines will take a little bit longer to catch up. One of the benefits of our new operating model is the introduction of a research development and innovation manager role, and that will allow the development of an RD&I strategy for forensic science and how we want to use forensic science across the country. And a key part of that is understanding what does Police Scotland need and want, and how is the science moving forward, and making sure that we focus resources on the right areas. Capital, I am very conscious that we are in a difficult climate, and the capital investment that we have across the policing family needs to be spent in the right places. Clearly there is a lot of expensive technology in operation in forensic services, and we can continue to invest in that. I think the key from my perspective is that we need to be investing in the right things, that we need to be thinking about it from a joined up perspective, not just about how the science is progressing, but how that can then be applied and what is going to make the biggest difference in terms of keeping communities and the public safe in Scotland.
Thank you very much. And as you know, I'm very keen that we have a more public conversation about technology and generally in policing, but in terms of technology and forensic services. And I'm hoping you'll be able to move to demonstrate that more, maybe in Parliament, and look over the next year about showcasing what is possible. When I visit your labs, I'm always asking the price of your machines, and they are, some of them up to £1 million for a machine. I'm going to come to Katarina and then Katrina. So, Katarina.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Fiona, for your report. I suppose my question links onto what Paul was asking about earlier, so that's the new operating model, which is very welcome. We've just heard about the benefits that it's designed to deliver. We are very conscious that every time, for example, we discuss it in more detail at the Forensic Services Committee, is that this is something that's quite complex. It is taking time. It had to be kind of re-baselined. I think to some degree, some things are taking potentially a bit longer. And every time you do have such a large transformation program, it does take management's and staff's time and attention capacity away from the business as usual, where there's an ever-increasing demand. I mean, it's got no indication of slowing down. So, and when you balance that transformation activity with the very, very kind of high volume and complex business as usual activity, there's always the risk that there may be negative impacts on one of those. So my question, I suppose, is what is the risk of managing the transformation in the BU activity? What are the key risks that you see to the success of either of those activities, and what are the steps that you have in place to mitigate those risks?
Thank you for the question. It is complicated, and we have a number of risks identified in relation to the maintenance of service delivery alongside the implementation of change. I can't sit here and say that there hasn't been any impact on service as a result of the change that the service is implementing, because it's substantial, it's cross-cutting, and it has impacted on every member of staff within the service. In saying that, we have discrete areas where we've seen an impact with associated plans to manage that. And it is around assessing the risks and working in partnership to understand and manage any impacts of those. We do have a Programme Management Office function, which is a service back provided by Police Scotland that provides us with that professional change management support. That's particularly important from an integration into the business perspective, and it is a constant focus of the organisation to manage that business as usual activity alongside the change in innovation. We have a strong management team within Forensic Services, and a key benefit of the current structure around phased implementation is making sure that we get the accountability at the right places, and we use the expertise of the right people to bring that implementation into play, and it's getting as many people involved who know the job, know the business, in actually bringing it to life. Being able to present the benefits, which we have been tracking for some time in great detail at the last Forensic Services Committee meeting, was quite a milestone in terms of being able to demonstrate and translate some of the things which we have delivered. The pace of the programme is slower than was set out in the original full business case to Resources Committee, and the reason for that has been that the investment that was set out and approved through that full business case hasn't been available, and therefore the approach to self-investment through driving efficiency out of the organisation, as well as investment of cashable benefits as we implement each phase of delivery, is allowing us then to progress with further phases. So the consequence of that is that the benefits are delayed in some areas.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Final question, Katrina.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Fiona. I find your report very interesting. Thank you. And I'm looking at the areas of benefits delivered and your performance framework, and kind of touching on some of the conversation from this morning, but also, those things in your report and also your priority and inclusivity. So really, my question is around recruitment and retention. And talent, really, within forensics. And I'm wondering, because the first time I came to visit forensics, which was, 2 or 3 years ago, and we had a conversation around recruitment, getting the right people in who have the aptitude, who have the talent, have the ability, and the interest, in how actually perhaps a kind of apprenticeship type route might be appropriate for somewhere like forensics, because we know there are people with very specific aptitudes who may not be, they might be unable to access or navigate mainstream routes, academic routes, to getting into that work. So I wondered, has there been any more work around that area?
Thank you for the question, and the focus on inclusivity across the organisation is a key priority. It has been and continues to be this year and beyond. We need to make sure that we are talking to young people, I think in particular around a career in forensic science, dispelling some myths that exist around particularly people with disabilities and their ability to be able to operate within that field. And I think the answer around being a more inclusive and diverse organisation is very much in getting into schools and talking to youngsters before they make some of those big life decisions. Alongside that, a programme of apprenticeships is absolutely where we are planning to implement a pipeline, really, where we can use modern apprenticeships alongside partnership approach to sponsored degree programmes to bring people into the organisation through a less traditional route. We are oversubscribed through recruitment, generally into posts, and we have a lot of very professional, very expert people within the organisation, but we need to bring in other groups of people to complement that and to grow that diversity, and apprenticeships is absolutely what we intend to do.
Thank you very much. I'm just aware of how much underutilised and untapped talent there is out there in the world, and just offering that alternative route would be benefit everyone, I would think. Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your report and the work of forensic services teams. So we now come to item 8, and very much welcome Michelle MacLeod to the board. Michelle is PERC Commissioner, PERC standing for Police Investigation and Review Commissioner. So thank you for attending, very grateful for that. Doesn't seem a year since you were last here, but welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the opportunity to present my annual report for 2022-23. The report outlines key areas of work that our operational teams delivered, and I'm going to start with investigations. And as you may recall, and I discussed last year, the workload of the PERC investigations team significantly increased, and that was a direct result of one of the recommendations from the Dane Angelini report, which effectively transferred the responsibility to investigate all on-duty allegations of assault made against police officers and police staff from the police to the PERC. This transfer commenced on 4 October 2021, and I alluded last year to the increase in the workload that had created, and I can confirm that that has continued. During the year, we received 911 referrals from Police Scotland, Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, and other policing bodies operating in Scotland. That represented an increase in 51% from the previous year, when we had received 602 referrals. There was also a 10% increase in the number of investigations undertaken. To manage the increase, PERC established a new investigations assessment unit to, in effect, triage and assess all allegations of assaults referred to PERC. 98% of all the referrals were assessed with a decision taken within 5 days of receipt of all relevant information, and 64% of the investigation reports were submitted to the referring body within 3 months. That did not achieve our key performance target of 80%, but I'll come back to that later. In addition to the increased workload, we were instructed by the Crown to investigate 3 very complex, extensive and significant cases which utilised much of our investigation resource. In the report at page 14, you will see a breakdown of the referrals and investigations by type. And of note, Crown Office directed investigations into the circumstances of a death has continued to increase, with 30 investigations being conducted in relation to deaths following police conduct and 1 death in custody. As discussed last year and has already been referred to earlier by the Chief Constable, the report highlights a continuing trend of increasing demand on policing to deal with people experiencing mental health crisis or illness. And of the 31 death investigations that we carried out last year, 14 of the deceased had a background of mental ill health, and 7 of 14 deceased also had a history of drug addiction or alcohol dependency. If I can turn now to the review side of the House, last year PERC received 250 applications for a complaint handling review. Each application for review can have several individual complaint allegations, and we refer to them as heads of complaint. So the team examined 953 individual complaint allegations and issued 202 complaint handling reports. This is the highest number of individual complaints reviewed in a single year and represented a 17% increase from the previous year. The average timescale to complete a complaint handling review reduced from 4.6 months in the previous year to 3 months, so it was a 35% decrease. Overall, we found that 74% of complaints made by members of the public and brought to PARC for a review were reasonably handled by the police, and this is an improvement on the previous year and is the best performance by the police since the inception of the single National Police Service. In total, PARC made 229 recommendations and identified 45 individual or organisational learning points. Moving away from the operational core business of PARC, we were also involved in some other significant areas of work. PARC is a core participant in the ongoing public inquiry examining the events surrounding the death of Mr Bayou in 2015. PARC has disclosed several hundred witness statements and in excess of 900 productions, and a number of current and former employees have attended and have given evidence to the inquiry. Last year, PARC completed all but one of the recommendations from the Dame Angelini report that did not require legislation. And I'm pleased to report that the final one has also been concluded since then. If I could turn back to our strategic priorities and the key performance indicators, in light of the increased scope, scale, complexity of the workload of PARC, we commissioned a performance data and demand review of the operational functions of PARC to undertake in-depth review of all aspects of the management information and to consider the feasibility of our existing key performance indicators and to make recommendations. As part of that review, we conducted benchmarking with other similar oversight organisations, including the Independent Office for Police Conduct, the IOPC, and the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman, the SPSO. This established that PARC had the most challenging timescales to complete its investigations and reviews compared to other similar police oversight bodies in the United Kingdom. It was also interesting to find that comparable organisations faced similar issues to PARC, with a significant increase in their workload, more complex and protracted complaint reviews, and wider-ranging investigations. It also identified that our statistical counting had not taken account of delays that were totally out with the control of PARC, and consequently did not really give a true reflection of how effective the organisation was at meeting strategic objectives. The recommendations and findings from that review were considered by our Audit and Accountability Committee and has resulted in new strategic objectives and key performance indicators which are now set out in our strategic plan. They do take account of delays out with the control of PARC, and the timescales are now tiered according to the category of the investigation or the complexity of the application for a complaint handling review. However, our focus does continue to be a commitment to learning and continuous improvement. Our strategic priorities will require to be delivered alongside potential changes to our statutory responsibilities as a result of the Police Ethics Conduct Scrutiny Scotland Bill that forms part of the Scottish Government's legislative programme for this parliamentary year. The bill, as you will be aware, seeks to introduce new legislative provisions that may extend the current powers and responsibilities of PARC and alter our existing governance arrangements. So in conclusion, in another demanding year, PARC has continued to deliver our core functions and provide robust scrutiny of policing in Scotland. And I would just take this opportunity to thank my management team and staff for their hard work, commitment and dedication, and our key partners, including Police Scotland and the authority for their constructive and effective liaison during last year on a very wide range of issues. I hope that gives you a brief overview.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and I'm very grateful for the report. I'm going to ask a question myself. On page 18, you talk about the use of tasers, and it's related, I think, to some of our earlier conversation about mental health, and the figure that struck me was, well, 2. Tasers were discharged 60 times by police officers, and the first thing is, can you make an assessment whether that was proportionate or higher than you might expect, or how can we triangulate that as an authority about the use of force in Scotland compared to elsewhere? But more importantly, you say 33% of those discharges related to persons experiencing some form of mental health crisis. But this is what struck me after that. At 29 of those 33, the person was in possession of a weapon, primarily a knife. And that might not be the clearest public recognition about where a taser was used, but it appears to be quite often to prevent self-harm. Would that be your judgment from your review of the use of tasers? So firstly, do you think it's proportionate in your broad experience to the number of police officers? That's a 60. And give us some guidance as a review on that mental health and the use of a taser to prevent somebody harming themselves.
Indeed. In fact, I think the figure 20 of 60 was 2021-22 figure, and last year it was 77 discharges by police officers, of which 43 related to persons experiencing some form of mental health crisis. And again, in the 40 of the 43, the person was in possession of a weapon, primarily knives. And I think what I would say that in relation to that, it's important when we're looking at comparative data of use of tasers that we don't just look at blanket numbers, because that's quite a blunt instrument. It's not really informing us in detail of, it's probably not a fair comparison, because one of the things we need to know is why the taser was used and the circumstance it was used. So doing that further analysis, as we've done here, to say, well, there was a background in mental ill health or prevention that was used in many cases, and also, as you've alluded to, the fact that we've got an aggregating factor of a weapon. So it gives a context of where tasers are being used by police officers that I think is extremely useful. We obviously are looking to determine whether the use of a taser or any weapon by police in the circumstances is proportionate and reasonable. So we take account of obviously all the factors that are faced by police, and we'll take account of the training that police officers have, their guidance, their SOPs, and obviously in terms of that we would look to see, and I think the guidance would suggest if there was person has a weapon, then police officers should try to remain at a safe distance, because obviously if you're closer trying to use a baton, you're putting yourself at more risk. So all of those factors come into the mix, and when we're looking at a report, we will look and see in terms of the guidance what the officer's done, and if it's compliant with the guidance, and also we'll look at the risk assessment that's in place. But I think it is an interesting further analysis we've done to show the kind of circumstances where police are using tasers. It's not all about violent persons that they're being used. So I haven't had a chance, or I'm not aware of any kind of more widespread data about the differences between Scotland, England, etc. But I think that gives a context of what's happening in Scotland, which is maybe helpful, particularly in the current conversation we're having about mental health.
Thank you. I'll probably ask my own staff to work on that. Benchmarking data with, if you would allow that with your team. We're very interested in seeing where we are, how we might make sure that we're in the right area within policing in Scotland. Could you just, one more question. I'm sure I am, I think I am, all discharges of tasers have to be reported to you, even if it's before it's discharged, the pointing, the drawing. Just give us a reminder about the requirement to report to you what, in the instance where it is not discharged, but it might be drawn or the light put on somebody.
All presentations and discharges are required to be reported of all firearms to the park. And that includes actually CS Pava sprays.
So that's a public assurance that you will review all.
We have an assessment process, and I alluded to it. We have an assessment process that comes in. Obviously, they're quite voluminous, all the referrals we get in terms of firearms. They go through an assessment process, and what we probably could say is, in terms of where a weapon or has been used in relation to maybe a vulnerable group of persons, then we have a strong presumption that we'll take that on to full investigation, and that's really to provide the public with assurance that the police are dealing with such incidents appropriately. So there'll be a strong presumption that we would take that forward for the full investigation rather than just an assessment.
That's extremely helpful. Thank you very much. Having cut across some of my members here, so I'm going to come back to the order. Fiona.
Chair, thank you. And just, I think, Michelle, to echo Martin's thanks. I think that the range and complexity of work that you and your colleagues carry out in really challenging circumstances is impressive, and it's helpful and reassuring and assuring to read what you do. I'm interested from a public interest perspective, and in particular looking at the complaints handling reviews. So there's probably 2 or 3 facets to the question. It's, I think, very assuring that this is the highest number that you have said have been handled satisfactorily in recent times. So that gives us assurance that the complaints handling within Police Scotland is effective. So from a public interest point of view, how can you test and check that you're meeting the requirements of the public to have that reviewed? And also, do you think there's continued learning within Police Scotland, given what you've said, so that we could see a further improvement on that 74%?
So, obviously, PERC requires to take account of legal and public interest considerations. In terms of complaint handling, the primary function is to assess whether the complaint has obviously been handled to a reasonable standard by Police Scotland. Our mechanism for driving up improvements in terms of the complaint side is through recommendations. If we don't find it's reasonably handled, obviously we can make recommendations to Police Scotland, and sometimes they can be quite specific, related to maybe absences in guidance or SOPs, etc. So if we find that there is deficiencies, then that's the main source of driving through improvements. And that is reflected also in the investigations for police referrals that come to us. And again, we would look at an early stage at the assessment whether there's any particular public interest considerations that would persuade us to take it to a full investigation. It's slightly different, maybe if I can, I know you've asked about complaints, but slightly different when we've got Crown-directed investigations, because we get a terms of reference from the Crown and they'll set out what we're to examine. We can touch upon public interest considerations, but ultimately we'll report to them, and it'll be for the Crown, for example, if in a criminal allegation, if there's sufficient evidence to decide whether it's in the public interest to take a prosecution. And in relation to death investigations, it will be for the Crown to decide whether there's merit in the public interest taking an FAI. So they have got the final kind of decision-making on public interest in relation to Crown directed. But in the other areas, our main kind of tool to drive and shape is through our recommendations. And obviously we will, anything that rises out of the public interest will be something that we would certainly take cognizance of.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Alistair Hay.
Thank you, Chair. And Michelle, thank you very much for the report, which I read with great interest, and you've actually coloured that in very well for me today. I'm asking this question in the context of the question I asked earlier to the Chief Constable in relation to giving officers, frontline sergeants and inspectors the courage to allow frontline officers to move away from people who are in a state of distress through perhaps a mental health issue. And tragically, sometimes people, as you've highlighted here, will die, and that rightly has to be investigated, for the family and friends, but also for the police service. And you mentioned earlier the pressures that you have around increasing number of investigations, pressures around resource, common picture, and you've got a target of concluding these investigations within 80% within 3 months, and you've also mentioned that you've got a triage process. So just joining all that together, for me, when there's been a death, that must be something that is foremost and prioritised, rightly for the family and friends and for relatives, but equally the pressure that would be on police officers. So I'm just wondering what your approach and your thoughts are around these types of investigations in the context of what the Chief Constable is trying to achieve.
Indeed. In terms of our new strategic objectives, we've slightly given ourselves slightly more days. We have 90 days to investigate what we call Category A cases. I can confirm that all deaths are Category A. They are our tightest timescales, less serious, use that terminology. We've got a target now of 120 days, but Category A death cases still remain a high priority for all the reasons you've specified. What I would say, again, my first observation in the context of the wider kind of discussion about mental health investigations is PERC is instructed by the Crown in relation to investigate the circumstances of death, and if we are instructed, we don't have a discretion. It's very much the Crown's decision if we should investigate. And as has been alluded to quite properly, Article 2 rights are engaged, so it is important to identify learning from such cases. But yes, it is an increasing proportion of our workload, and we have probably increased our experience in lots of areas dealing with deaths, including the family liaison side of it in the recent past. One factor, again, which has been alluded to earlier, which I think could make a significant difference, is the rollout of the body-worn cameras that was referred to. One of the things we're often investigating in death cases is the state of the person when the police last had contact with them, or when they last had an interaction with them, and that can be quite difficult to bottom out, particularly if the person is no longer with us. Body cam footage would, I hope, make that assessment much easier for us, and would hope that it would negate us having to do an investigation after discussion with the Crown in many cases. So I think that will be a significant step forward in hopefully allowing us to deal with a lot of the cases that we're currently investigating. And I would echo the sentiments that we've heard earlier, that obviously we only can report on the policing aspect of a death, but obviously we know there's other agencies involved in other interactions. We can comment in our report about some of the actions of other agencies, but we can't make recommendations and we can't investigate because it's out with our remit. But I think the critical thing from our experience is the joined-up approach that needs to happen between the policing, NHS and mental health services to kind of alleviate some of the pressures on all of the organisations. So I would certainly echo the work that we've heard today as being critical to probably dealing with some of those the issues that we've experienced through the investigations. And then ultimately, obviously, Crown can decide to have an FEI where they can air all of these issues and the interactions between the agencies in a court.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If you turn your microphone. Thank you very much. Katharina?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for your report. Just this was an observation, a couple of questions, although you have already touched on some of the points that I was going to ask, including the body-worn video and the possible impacts of that on both investigations as well as possible complaints numbers and complaint reviews, etc. So, I mean, I think this report is absolutely fascinating, and obviously in the Complaints and Conduct Committee, we see the numbers on a quarterly basis as well. So, and I just wanted to say that we very much appreciate the input that is being provided to the committee through your members of staff who come and present, because I think for us as members of the committee, it provides a really important kind of triangulation point. So it's another public body's perspective on what is happening in Police Scotland, so we really value that independent level of kind of insight as well. So that's just in terms of observations. I also noticed, obviously, the statistic which you have pulled out as well, that up to, well, 74% of complaints were deemed to have been reasonably handled. And I think another thing that kind of jumps at me, so firstly, that's kind of the highest percentage that we've seen to date, and I was wondering if you would think, you know, from sort of an editorial perspective, do you take that as an indication that the complaints handling process, which has only been established a few years ago in terms of a national function rather than kind of all being handled in different divisions, do you think that that's the result of the bedding in of the process? And, you know, similarly, looking at the overall number of recommendations which have been issued, again, I see that there's a downward trend. So would you, from your perspective, what you're hearing from your members of staff, do you feel that it is a move into a positive direction, or is there anything else that we're seeing? I'm probably going to pause there. There's lots more questions, but I think that's probably the most pertinent one just now.
I think, yes, it's definitely a move in a positive direction. I think there's probably a number of factors at play. I think one of them is that there is a lot more interaction between the PERC reviews team and Police Scotland, PSD. We just had a liaison day a couple of weeks ago with a large turnout from Police Scotland and both our reviews and investigations team, where they did workshops about particular issues. So if there's common themes coming out that we're recommending, then we incorporated that in the workshop to say, this is why we keep coming to you, saying this is what we expect you to do, and we won't make that recommendation. So I think the interaction between the teams and more kind of contact we've had and more explanations we're giving as opposed to just putting out reports has perhaps been one of the significant factors, at least I'd like to think so. And I think as well, just as you say, that bedding in process has taken some time to you know, obviously start to show the benefits of that. And obviously the skills of the people in there have allowed us probably to not have to deal with so many of the lower level complaints, and so the ones we're looking at are the more kind of serious level complaints. So I think there's a number of different factors that's led to that positive development.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Constable, I wonder if you or your team would like to make a comment. I'm very interested in the improvement journey in the learning at DCC Connors.
Thank you. I'd like to just address the TASER benchmarking in particular. So whilst not a Home Office force and we don't submit data into the Home Office monitoring, we do actually capture the same data. In fact, we capture more data than the Home Office monitor. We do benchmark and have a look in relation to discharges in particular. Police Scotland is broadly similar to forces such as Greater Manchester Police or West Midlands Police. So we do look across to check where our benchmarking is. We also do extra training that is mandated by the College of Police, and we do an extra 6 hours training with our TASER trainers. And they do a lot more around de-escalation, working with people who have disability or mental health and being able to assess the risk. We also have a national TASER advisory group who make sure that they have oversight and scrutiny of our TASER, as well as having our national TASER who oversee our training. So just wanted to put that there in reassurance around our TASER as well.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. And have you seen any change in compliance when we supported the recommendation that the number of TASER trained officers was increased quite substantially? Has that made any impact on the proportionate and reasonable use of TASERs?
Thanks, Martin. So we're looking at every instance of TASER from a professional standards part, and the instances where we're referring matters to PERC are those instances where we have discharged a TASER. What I would say is the volume of instances where TASER is a tool or is an asset that can be used or can be pointed has a really positive impact. So in our experience, for every instance where we are discharging a TASER, there's probably another 10 instances where we are presenting a TASER, and that's having the impact, along with the officer's verbal communication, to de-escalate a situation. What's also really important is that the number of instances where an individual may be injured as a consequence of being tasered is negligible, and in every instance we will offer them a medical check. So it is a really positive picture. If I can, I was just going to make one other point, Chair, in relation to our complaint handling model. So I think some of the positive figures from Michelle's report is as a consequence of us changing our complaint handling model just before this year started, as Katrina had indicated. So all our staff are trained the same way. There's consistency around how we'd handle complaints, and I think that's resulting in a much higher proportion of complaints being handled well. And to the point around organisational learning and recommendations, we are committed to complying with every recommendation or learning point that Michelle would make. So I can give the board assurance that we do that, and it's probably something that we would report from time to time through the Complaints and Conduct Committee.
Thank you very much, and I do see the data on recommendations at the end, and thank you, Katharina, for overseeing some of the changes with Police Scotland in terms of complaint handling. I think there has been quite a significant move in that area. Just final comment, before I ask you any final comments from yourself, Commissioner. I think we share a frustration around this board, and I think you mentioned it, or indicated it, the siloed nature of the work that we sometimes have to take, mental health being one of them, where this is a whole system review recommended by HMICS, but actually recommended a long time ago by Dame Angelini in a report, and we still haven't got it yet. And I think until we do get closer to that, and I'm hoping some of the work that our Chief Executive was indicating, led by ourselves and the Scottish Government, will move us closer, not to the abstracts, which are quite straightforward in some ways, everybody knows what should happen, it's to how the practical work can be, the work with people who are in distress, not always having a recognised mental health issue, and that was made quite clear when I had a very welcome meeting with Alan Tropper from the Mental Welfare Commission about mental health, its limitations as a description, the vulnerability issues, and I'm sure Fiona McQueen knows this. So I think for the board, one of the issues here, and to meet the Chief Constable's aspiration of a reasonable, proportionate response, let's just keep it to mental health, is to actually, it must be a cross-sector engagement, and then when issues occur, there must be a shared responsibility, because at the moment, I'm afraid sometimes it feels, certainly to my colleagues in the foundation, Police Federation, and sometimes to my more senior police professional colleagues, the police are left holding the issue. Everybody else go away from it, and then the formal death following police contact is investigated formally by you. Anyway, that's the frustration that I have, which I want. We've been on about mental health now as a board for 2 years, 2.5 years. I asked Fiona to lead it from her position 2.5 years ago. We're inching closer to these areas, and thank you, Chief Constable, for your clear focus on this, and thank you for your comments in this area. Are there any final comments for us as a board, Commissioner?
No, I think as long as I've answered all your questions, thank you.
Excellent. Well, as always, thank you very much for coming to us and giving the board that clear public assurance about the work and the protection of the public that you offer there. I'm going to come on now to item 9, procurement standing orders. I'm going to, this is submitted by James Gray. It's been to Resources Committee. Now, am I going to ask you to come in and then ask, let me ask you to come in, James Gray, and then ask Resources Committee to give us their advice.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. We're seeking 2 approvals here. The first is in relation to an update of the standing orders for procurement. It's an administrative update specifically related to thresholds for procurement around regulated spend, and it's in line with what we need to do through the Scottish procurement policy note. The second approval that we're seeking today is that such future matters like these updates be delegated to Resources Committee. So I'll leave it there, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Grant, do you have advice for us from being through your...
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that the Resources Committee studied this in detail, and we're content with the amendments that are proposed here, but also we're content with the proposal that future discussion is taking place just within the Resources Committee, with authority to approve the annual or thereby updates to procurement thresholds without having to refer it back to the board.
Questions before I come? Well, thank you very much. It's exactly what we're trying to do, drive down the delegated authority, make the committees very clearly responsible, but the committee chair can keep us informed through their reports and then, if necessary, push it back up. So are you content to approve the proposed changes for the approval route for review, suspend, vary and revoke to the standing orders in relationship to contracts? Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Item 10, this is the Financial Performance Quarterly Report submitted by James Gray, Chief Financial Officer. I'd like to invite James Gray, Chief Financial Officer, to speak to the report. James.
Thank you, Chair. And again, this report was at Resources Committee earlier this week, so I'll be fairly brief in my comments. The overarching comment I would make is there's been significant progress since the board was last held in this venue last autumn. The Q3 forecast on the revenue budget is an overspend of £5 million. That's compared to the position we found ourselves in last autumn, where the forecast overspend was 18.9 million, and the main changes around it, the progress that's been made, is set out in Appendix B. But a huge amount of work right across the organisation over the last number of months in order to bring that budget position back into the forecast at Q3, which is 5 million. All that I would add to that is that we've now had the period 10 results, which is to the end of January, and we have seen again some good progress there, so we continue to work as hard as we can to reduce that overall 5 million forecast overspend. So we don't see 5 million as a target, we see it as the parameter, the upper parameter, and we'll seek to continue to work to bring that down. The Accountable Officer wrote to Scottish Government before Christmas setting out the forecast overspend and to seek approval for an authorised overspend of up to £5 million. We've not yet had confirmation of that, but from speaking regularly with colleagues in Scottish Government, we know that we will get that budget cover before the end of the financial year, so that we will be in an authorised position with regards to overspend, but we've been told it will probably be quite late on in the financial year before we get that. But as I say, we will continue to work to better that. With regards to capital, at the end of December, we had spent 88% of the annual budget. There is a requirement over the final quarter of the financial year to manage still an element of over-allocation of £1.1 million, what we call slippage, and we have plans in place to be able to do that so that we do come in on budget. The big difference from Q2 to Q3 is that there has been a significant reduction in the amount of slippage that we had to identify to push into the next financial year. That has come down by £15 million. So from a budget perspective, that's positive, in that we are tracking now to deliver a balanced budget for capital. But from an operational perspective, it obviously causes us serious, has serious implications in that we are not buying equipment, we're not moving with technology, we're not able to do work in the estate, such as replacing boilers, at the pace at which we would want to. We've had to slip that, and obviously it has a knock-on impact into taking up some of the resources that we would otherwise want to spend, again, advancing in the next financial year. So, as everybody knows, capital has been an issue for us and continues to be so, and I think this just highlights that position furthermore. And then finally, on reform, we are forecasting that we will also break even on that budget line. But I'll pause there, Chair, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, just invite Grant to make any comment, because this has been come through your committee.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I would confirm everything that James has just said. We spent quite a long time on this at the Resources Committee earlier in the week, going into the detail of it, and we would commend the overall collaboration to arrive at mitigating actions which have been very effective during the time since last summer, when a long list of possibilities have been translated into quite a lot of activity. The impact of the mitigating actions is shown in Appendix B, which I think actually summarises the activity extremely well over the last few months. And we're very keen that, as I mentioned earlier, that the learning that has been achieved from this process is recorded, so that hopefully we're not in this situation again, but it's a good form of reference to see what has actually been able to be achieved in the time since last summer.
Thank you very much, Grant, for that. I'm just going to invite our Chief Executive as the Accountable Officer to make comment. It was raised by James, her formal role in this, telegraphing what might be happening, and then just give us a bit of the analysis that you have about what our position is and our authority now that you've written to the Scottish Government formally about this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wrote a few months ago to the Scottish Government setting out that our expectation that we would be overspent by 5 million, and that was a major improvement from the 18.9, I think it was, that was indicated last autumn, and asking for authorised approval for the overspend. I think the Scottish Government will be encouraged by the effort that Police Scotland have put into this to bring this back in line, and I think the lack of confirming that amount is they're just waiting to see if it goes down further. They will be having other demands across the whole of the public sector. So I think the fact that we will get cover, and I think they are expecting that to reduce, and that's when we'll get the final figure. But we are within those parameters that we've set out, so I have no concerns.
Thank you. Are there any questions from any board members?
If there's no more questions, can I just add something in relation to the position we now find ourselves in, just to echo what Grant has said, tremendous work from both the corporate side of the business and the operational side of the business to get control of the budget, bring in the mitigations, make some challenging decisions that some of which have risk associated with them, and we're grateful to the board, to Grant's committee in terms of being that critical friend and at times holding our feet to the fire in this space. But tremendous effort by colleagues. I just wanted to recognise that in relation to this item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to reflect also what you have then just said and what the Chief Executive said about the transformation since that September meeting in here. And I have been very impressed by the way that the corporate side on finance have worked directly with the operational side, and this couldn't have happened without that. And I think that's a transformation, to get a grip on both what the spreadsheets are telling us, but also how we're delivering a service within this financial envelope. Now, since I've become chair, we've always had a balanced budget since I've been here, and I'm optimistic still that I can keep that record, but it is quite important to me, not quite important, the accountable officer has set it, so within this very small percentage of a £1.4 billion, we have told formally the Scottish Government that we may overspend, but it's quite a different picture from when we were discussing at 18 million. So to be very clear, and Alistair said this at one of our meetings, if we don't have financial credibility, we don't have operational or advocacy credibility. It matters a great deal to all of us that we're able to stick within the budget. And this is the challenge you set yourself at the beginning of this meeting, Chief Constable, where you set out your view about delivering an effective service that keeps the public safe within the financial parameters. And that's the second phase of public service reform I talked about. We probably don't get enough, although we say it often enough, credit for the 10 years of public service reform, which actually delivered a £1 billion worth of public saving whilst increasing, in my view, the effectiveness of policing. I'm afraid we're now back on the public service, a second round of public service reform, when I think we have a very clear commitment from yourselves as an operation side of it and ourselves as the oversight. We're going to get there over this 3 to 5 years that I asked for and Jane Connors reflected as well. So we're going to work hard together on that, but this financial year, let's see where we are when we meet in a month's time in Edinburgh, I imagine, and there we'll be able to say whether or not we are within budget for the third year running or what our deficit has been. But I go back to that. It's very important to say I've been very impressed since October, really. You know, I can see when you came and you got ahead of this issue, you allocated, I know, very significant authority to DCC Spears to get control over overtime, leadership to DCC Connors on these ones, support from DCC Malcolm Graham in terms of where the overtime was going spent, which is in his area, which is local policing, and then the financial support and credibility and analysis that you gave all the way through as Chief Financial Officer. So thank you for that. We should just recognise that is a pretty significant achievement, given the serious concerns the board had about financial credibility leading to, or not being financial credible, leading to not having operational credibility. And our advocacy for what we have achieved for next financial year, which is a above inflation allocation in both revenue and capital, is dependent on financial credibility. So thank you very much indeed for that. That takes us to the final item in the public session. If I could ask that everybody back here for the private session at 12:15, and thank you very much for your Chief Constable and your report. Thank you.